So then you guys are working upstairs?
Do you want me to go get coffee? You want some coffee from the coffee shop?
Yeah. Thank you.
Morning.
Morning, Joe.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Julie, it's 9 o'clock on the dot. We have a quorum, so we can get started whenever you're ready.
Let's begin. I'd like to welcome everyone to the August 25th Landmarks Commission meeting. It's nice to see everyone, even if it continues to be remote and virtual. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio Open Meeting Law and Section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinance of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rule of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, we ask that you use the raised hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile version and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again and muting your microphone. We'll also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities are being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter via the website and email have been considered. We have also received emails from those who provided written comment on a particular matter. We'd like to call the August 25th, 2022 Landmarks Commission meeting to order. Mr. Pettit, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Bonezzi,
Here.
Mr. Kalikia,
Here,
Mr. Dryer,
Here.
Mr. Edmund, Director Wong, Mr. Strickland,
Here.
Mr. Tarasik.
Here.
Ms. Trott.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a quorum.
Excellent. We'll begin with our certificates of appropriateness. We'd like to, a little housekeeping, just to remind everyone that Mr. Brunges, the facilitator, does control your slides, so please tell him when you'd like to advance. We'd like to welcome the first applicant to unmute your mic and announce yourself and tell us about your project. The first applicant is located at 2227 Payne Avenue, aka the 1600 East 23rd Street addition.
Madam Chair, our first applicant was having trouble getting the link to work this morning, so I just resent it to them. We can give them a few minutes or we can move to the second item on the agenda.
Keep things moving since we have a fairly lengthy agenda. Why don't we move to the second one?
Oh, wait,
Applicants here?
he is in the meeting, so I think we're good. Are you here, Brian?
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that technological issues.
Glad you made it.
Shall I jump right in, or?
Why don't you just announce yourself for our record and then tell us about your project.
Okay, I'll start out. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Grambort from ED DeFrancisco and Siebold. We're the architect. Here with my colleague, Berto Olivos. I'm going to give a brief process to the project and then hand it over to Umberto for the primary description. This project is kind of the second phase of a renovation addition to the Norma Her Women's Center. Previously, we had presented a smaller elevator addition and lobby renovation to you. on the primary building. This phase 2 is the adaptive reuse of what we're looking at here, the zippity print single-story building off East 23rd. This is going to be reused and connected with a connector, and you'll see this in our presentation, to the Norma Her Women's Center. It is to ultimately function as one facility with Norma Her still being accessed, or the entire facility still being accessed off of Payne Avenue. That primary building will still be the primary entrance, kind of the control point, and really only egress access will be out of this building. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Umberto, and he'll walk you through the work.
Okay. Good morning. The project it's located on East 23rd Street. It is located. It's an existing building between the Fraternal Order of Police, and there's electrical local 38 union hall. Right now, it's where Zippity Print is located, and it's a warehouse facility basically, and they have a printing production inside. It's a one-story building, which was built around 1960 or so. We couldn't find the exact date of construction, but our structural engineer, based on the structural type, was telling us. And what we're planning is to expand into that facility and using the most of the footprint of the existing facility and build up from there. The main activity in this new addition would be the units, the sleeping units for the residents, which will house the homeless people for Norma Her. They have a program that they house the local population of homeless, and that facility, the existing Norma Her, has a limit up to 200 people that they can house. Currently, most of those, the residents who come in to sleep, they're sleeping in I would say
Congregate living.
congregate living. They're in bunk beds, and they're in a large room, and probably 30 to a room. And due to the time change with COVID, that's not acceptable from the point of view from the facility. So what we're planning to do in the new space is have single-use rooms, which would house one bed and one bathroom each. And we're aiming for a total probably of 98 units there. And also have some open spaces for them to do, between their eating and sleeping. In the first floor, there's going to be a little warming kitchen and a seating area. And in the second floor, we're going to have an open lounge, which would house the different activities such as probably TV or training or counseling, which would happen in the open space. Right now, what we're doing is connecting with the existing facility, the Norma Her and the Fox building, through a one-story brick connector. I would call it a pedestrian walkway. And what we're doing is a series of piers and masonry piers and storefront to create that open space. So that way we don't have a tunnel effect. And this connector creates an interior courtyard, which right now is currently the back parking. So the idea is to convert between the two buildings, have some kind of secured open space for days like today or in the fall. That people can be in a secure space and enjoy the good weather. Right now, what we're doing outside, this is the front elevation, the top out of East 23rd. We're cladding the first floor and adding a second floor, and the main materials is going to be a metal panel, which going to have a couple colors, which are coming next. And you're seeing it off East 23rd. It's the ribbons of windows for the dormitory, and to the my right, it's the stair tower, which we're taking it all the way to the roof to have access to the mechanical equipment. On the left side, right above the service dock, we're maintaining an area with exposed existing masonry brick. In those 4 windows to my left is the lounge area, which will have views to East 23rd, and also on the south side we'll have views to the courtyard from above. The lower elevation, it's a little bit graphically. What we're seeing is the south elevation is the courtyard view, and towards my right, it's the view from the loading dock, those 2 vertical ribbon windows, which will be further about a good 26 feet. So it's not in the same plane. The left side, there's a little 1-story storefront entrance. That's our enclosed connector for where it's going to abut to the new addition. Next slide. These 2 elevations represent the where the existing building is butting really close to the property line. The top elevation is the west elevation, where part of it opens into the existing Norma Hurd parking lot, and the other section, it's almost right to the property line of those adjacent properties, which are current surface parking. And we're being challenged to introduce windows. That was one of the comments from the planning, to see if we can introduce windows on the west elevation, because we almost have like about 3.1 feet away from the property line. So we might have an access to introduce more windows to those bedrooms. The bottom elevation, it's right on the property line. So we have the 0 lot approach, and we have the fire rating. So it's going to be a blank, but we're carrying the same materials wrap around the 4 sides of the building. This is the additional the connector we're putting between the 2 buildings. The top photograph represents the area. As a backdrop is the Fox building, that 2-story structure out of the red masonry brick. And currently there's a patio there, which is enclosed by a metal fence, where the homeless ladies can be in a secure environment and away from any public threats or so. And what we're doing is we're creating this nice ribbon of vertical piers and masonry and storefront, which have operable windows. So in summer or spring, the lower awning windows can open and create more like a breezeway. And that way it's connected, and there's going to be a pair of doors that open from that side to directly into the courtyard. Next slide. This is just renderings from the courtyard. We had done in-house, sort of to give us a feel of how that enclosed courtyard will look, with one side flanked by the new 1-story connector, and then the other, the 2-story new addition that Norma Hurd. It's just different angle views.
I think one additional item to reinforce, if we take a look at the connector again, the intention of the connector is to match the materials of the new elevator lobby, which was recently approved. We're using the same brick and stone, and similarly, the metal panels on the slightly older addition, the connecting link between the 2 kind of structures. That's kind of where we're taking cues from the existing building and using that to wrap the new addition. So we're trying to use those same materials in a similar language, but clearly making this new addition a new structure, not mimicking the old historic building. So if there are any questions, we can certainly address those.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with feedback from the local design review committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was reviewed by the Downtown Flats Design Review Advisory Committee on August 4th. It was approved for final design with the following items to be submitted for staff review and approval. And those items include the trash enclosure, the rooftop enclosure, the lighting plans, including the transformer location, and the landscape plan at the tree lawn with coordination with the city arborist. So it was approved as presented with those conditions.
All right, thank you. And we'll open up the floor for questions and comments from the commission. Mr. Brunges?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, as staff, want to make one note here that the Zippy Print building is not designated as part of the landmark designation. So the reason it's here, it's mainly for that connector. So when looking at the revisions to the Zippy Print building, that is not designated, and the final plans will probably go through city planning staff later on.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful. So what is on the screen is basically what we're giving the primary feedback on. Great, questions or comments from the commission? Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I really like the design of this connector. The fact that it's primarily windows, but with, the masonry elements to kind of give it some form and structure. Operable windows, making it, more open to the courtyard. And so I think it's a very well thought out and functional element to be added to this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Mr. Benazzi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just echo those comments of Mr. Strickland, that I think the design of this connector and the overall project is quite sensible for the area. I'll just note, on a personal standpoint, I have used those bricks on a project, and on a historic project, and I think that they're going to be quite appropriate for the look of this addition that you're doing. So overall, it looks very well. I don't have any glaring issues, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benazzi. I would echo what everyone said. I think it's a very modest addition, meets the needs of the facility in a very humble, quiet way. So I am in support of the new addition. Could you just go back to the plan, Carl? Okay. Okay.
Is that where you'd like it, or where would you?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Just looking at the footprint of the new addition. Make sure we understand the extent. Right there. That was the one thing I was a little unclear on first. Okay, well, I have no objections to that. I think it's a very, modest addition and very sensible, as was said. Other questions or comments from Mr. Strickland? Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve the project as presented with the additional comments from the Design Review Committee being developed and submitted to staff for record and final approval.
That included the trash enclosure, the lighting, the landscaping, and John, was roof enclosure, that was the fourth?
Yes, the rooftop enclosure was the fourth.
Yeah. Yes, and rooftop enclosure. Those are the four that you're noting, Mr. Strickland?
Yes, yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Benezi?
I'll second that motion.
Excellent, thank you for the second. Any further discussion? No. Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonezi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trot,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Ms. Trot.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. Could I ask a clarification question and the mention that this review was limited to the connector, as if I'm understanding correctly, but that we may have to present the new building to Planning Commission as well. Who would I get clarification on that from? Yes. Reach out to planning.
I think, depending on what the director would like to do, I think we could sign off on this jointly with city planning. I think it's at that level that it's probably good to go overall, but we can clarify that and then get back with you on that.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. I agree with that approach.
Great. All right.
Right.
Have a good morning.
Excellent, you too. We look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to our second applicant, located at 780 East Boulevard, the Turkish Garden, new garden plan, and Phase 2 Turkish women suffrage.
Madam Chair, I just have a point of order. This item was actually tabled at the meeting of May 13th, 2021. So we need a motion and a second to remove it from the table.
Excellent, thank you for making sure that we do the proper process. Would someone like to make a motion to remove it from tabled?
Director Huang, I will make a motion to remove it from the table.
Second
that. We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Pettit, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonezi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Dr. Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trot.
Yes.
The item is removed from the table. Thank you.
Excellent. I'd like to welcome the applicant, and please announce yourself and please tell us about your project.
Is this for the French garden?
This is for the Turkish garden.
All right, sorry.
Is Burge? Is Burge with us today?
I believe Burge is here. He's muted at the moment. Burge, are you with us in person?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We did consider some of your concerns from the last meeting. And what I like to do is present you with a list. If you, Don, could you post the project, the cover? Yes. we did consider some of your concerns. And let me start by saying this. The site presented a number of challenges to address for this unique program. The location of the site between East Boulevard and East 88th Street is completely isolated from the constellation of the Nationalities Gardens along Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, with a terrain dropping 20 feet from east to west. The site. The existing trees will not be touched. A licensed arborist would be retained prior to work commencement to ensure that existing trees are not damaged. The site grading is minimized by taking advantage of the existing topography. The platform for the Women's Suffrage Assembly was designed as frost-protected shallow foundation to minimize site disturbance, thus saving energy and construction costs. This technology was pioneered by Frank Lloyd Wright to achieve affordability for his Usonian homes. Today, this method of construction is prevalent in Scandinavia. In addition, the existing sidewalk phase 1, flagstone and welcome markers are to be utilized to define the gateway to the ritual of entrance. The context. The classical scheme, as indicated, defines the setting and character in a humanistic manner, making connections to the historical precedents with a composition based on a hierarchical formal system. The platform for the Women's Suffrage Assembly. The ellipse configuration depicting the globe for the universal women's suffrage defines the sacred place. The performance stage, which includes the actors, both the sculptural figures, and the public with a backdrop of the 3D crescent and star to add meaning and value. The color and motif of the pavement is dark gray, sweat fine texture representative of Cold Spring jet mist granite, fine rub with control joints representing the geographic coordinate system. That is, we are mimicking the actual granite, both in color and finish. The entrance apron from East Boulevard celebrates the formality of entrance. The color and motif of the pavement is French gray, sweat, fine texture representative of Cold Spring charcoal gray granite, fine rub with control joints defining the sunburst. The walkway defines the axis of the composition. The color and motif of the pavement is spring beige, sand finish, representative of Indiana buff limestone, honed with the control joints defining a scale pattern.
Can I interrupt really quickly? Do you have an image in your presentation to illustrate some of this? Okay, so.
I have them on the drawing, right? The tulip, pop art to make them smile. The magnified scale of the tulip reverses the traditional relationship between viewer and object, thus intensifying the awareness of the subject matter with the intent to bring color to this isolated area of the cultural gardens. It is intended to celebrate springtime throughout the 4 seasons in Cleveland, hence extending the planting season of the landscape plan. The petals are bright red and the stem is light green, and we are in process of working with Schofield Incorporation and Davis Colors to get the custom color concrete elements in place. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We're gonna just let Carl maybe catch up because your presentation was very articulate, but it's want to see if there's any images that can help the commission. Okay, Carl, is at the end of the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, that's a good one to maybe stop on. Is there feedback from our representative from the gardens? Do we have Lori with us today?
Hi, this is Paul Burek. Lori is not here today. So you know, we have the One World Day coming up this Sunday, and she's quite busy getting ready for that. I am the chair of the Design and Preservation Committee, and this proposal did pass the local or the Gardens Design Preservation Committee and the board of the executive board supported that motion and passed it. The only comment, I think Birch described things in quite a detail. The comment I would make is that the topography, as you can see in the picture now, is there's quite a bit of elevation change, and it's quite rapid or quite drastic. And so at first we questioned the idea of the tulip being laid in the ground, whether that would really be meaningful or so. But in this instance, you can see the image from the upper level. So, for example, in that view that you're looking at now, where the car is, there's a road, there's a sidewalk, and people looking from that perspective will see that image of a tulip with a sort of a bird's eye view. So it does make sense or is meaningful because of the topography.
Excellent. Thank you for that feedback. We appreciate it. We will now then open the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Who'd like to start us off? Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the hardscape is beautiful. It's well thought out, and Burge did an excellent job explaining the design philosophy behind the what is being presented. I just wondered if, as part of this phase, there would be any additional landscaping added, or if that'll come in future phases, or if that had been developed in previous phases.
Robert, that's a very good question. The landscape plan is included with this whole set. It's under L-1.0, and we have an extensive landscaping plan.
So are you asking us to vote on that today, or will that be presented at a future date?
No, that's part of this presentation. The drawing should be included, no? Yes, there you are. No, L10. Yeah, there it is.
Can you provide a brief explanation as to the new landscaping?
Yeah. What we are doing is we are having beds of tulips of different colors, but the beds are basically composed of myrtle, daffodils, so that the daffodils would come in early spring, the tulips would come in late spring, so that there is always a color in the garden. At the main entrance, as you can see, where we have almost right by the entryway, we have a bed of Pachysandra there. And under the sign, we have myrtle. So basically, along the main pathway on either side, we have the beds of tulips with the daffodils, so that the colors are always there changing. It's the whole idea is to almost make it as if it were at the Tulip Festival in Istanbul, so that when you have in the late spring with the tulips coming, that it would add up color to this isolated area. That's basically the extent of it. Other than that, the trees would stay exactly the way they are.
Okay, so are you saying that the, the dark green elements are the new planting beds for the tulips and daffodils?
Right, right. You can see them like on either side of the walkway,
Mm-hmm.
and also those little circular things that you see there. Those are the beds that have the ground cover, the daffodils, and the tulips. So that always there is a color there.
Carl, can you point to those on it? Just so they're more apparent to people. So the hatched area around the stem of the tulip, and then on either side of the
Yes.
walking.
Exactly. And then along the walkway on this side, you can see the beds. Then you can see the Pachysandra right in the front.
And that's a heavier hatched area, or right there.
That's the Pachysandra. And then around their flagpole and their sign, we have a bed of Vinca minor, which is the myrtle. So we have to try to emphasize the color to make it as colorful and with the flowers.
All right, understood. That's very helpful. Thank you.
First, just everything is concrete now, correct? I know, and then
Concrete.
integral color.
And Julie, everything is concrete, and we are trying to mimic the color of the stone from Cold Spring. We went to Cold Spring and we looked at their colors, and we are trying to highlight their finish and their colors.
I think that's, I appreciate the change from last time where before you were doing the topical, the topical application of the color. I think, using the different textures and integral color is a great change from the last presentation. So I appreciate you listening to our feedback, because I think you'll have better longevity to this. And I think, it will be appreciated more with, the approach that you're taking now. My last question is regarding the sculptures and the signage. Are you asking for approval now or?
As far as the sculptures, I'm going to let the Turkish delegate address those issues. Mehmet, would you like to refer to the sculptures, because they are commissioning the sculptures separate from this project?
Yes, if you would remember from the last meeting, we talked about the sculptures. The main sculpture to begin with, Atatürk. Atatürk is the founder of the Turkish Republic. And after the Ottoman Empire going down, and then in 1923. And by the way, next year will be our centennial 100-year anniversary. So our target is, once we get the approval from you, then we're going to continue the progress on the sculptures. So far, we have 3 sculptures out of the 5 finished. And there are 2 ladies. One lady is Western. As you may know, Atatürk westernized Turkey big time. And looking at the West, and today's Turkey is pretty much a very Western nation. But then on the Anatolia side, Anatolia being the cross cultures between East and West over, I would say, thousands of years, but then it really goes beyond 10,000 years. So during that time period, there were a lot of different ethnic populations, and bringing it to today's Turkey since 400 AD. And the Anatolian woman will be wearing with outfit that it would actually symbolize all those time periods. And that would also typify what Anatolian woman is. It's not just what we have today, but then we had, Arabic nations, Armenian and Kurdish, and the earlier ones. So out of the three, we have the two children, boy and a girl, and Atatürk looking at the process. And this happened in 1934, December 5th, the very first time Atatürk made women to be elected and to elect. So we want to just bring that. And then I think, as Berj mentioned, this can be really a good place, a fitting place, being multicultural, multinational. That's really the only in the world, not only in US, but only in the world. I think we thought that this would be a good display there for the women's suffrage. Out of the five, Atatürk statue is not finished yet, and then one woman not finished yet. And unfortunately, our sculptor in Toronto, after finishing the three, suddenly found that the family found out he had a pancreatic cancer, and we lost him. So we are, at a young age, like 50. So he has an assistant, so they are going to continue. And I will actually let Engin, I think Engin, he's the president of Turkish American Society, and he's directly involved with this project. If Engin, you may want to take over and talk about where we are with the rest of the statues.
Sure. Yeah, our two kid and the girls, like the two kids, they are ready. They are casted, and this weekend I'm going to go to Canada, pick them up, and bring to here. The others, Atatürk and two women, they are one woman is like the half done, and just like the legs remain. They are going to finish that one hopefully this month, and we will be starting Atatürk and the other woman sculpture. But also like we got other ideas that from our from Turkey, the company that working in United States, they also volunteered to build this Atatürk and the woman in United States instead of the Canada. So we
are they all cast out of bronze? Just to you tell us a little bit about the materiality of these. Are they all cast out of bronze?
It is not bronze. They used because of this cold weather and the hot and cold, it's bronze, and also changing the color. We want to keep the color of the initial sculpture. They are using they are working with the one of the Canadian universities to create a different kind of stone material. It is not the stone, like it mixed with 22 different material mixed and cast it that way. So it can keep the color, and it won't change color, and it won't crack, and it will be sturdy. They use the same material in one of the Turkish, the Atatürk sculpture in Michigan. So it's going to be similar, and it's been like the 5 years they have it. It didn't change the color. It is still look like the first day.
Can you supply us a picture of that? I think that it would be helpful for staff just to understand the materiality. And what is the scale of these sculptures?
Yeah, like
are they human scale or are they larger?
So yeah, 1 second. Like, is there any email that I can attach or?
You can. Unfortunately, you can't share your screen, and the presenter can't share an email right now. But if you forward it to Mr. Brunges and Mr. Pettit, they'll have it for the file. So just a general understanding of the scale of these sculptures would be helpful. Like, are they human scale, standing around 6 foot, or are they 8 foot?
Atatürk will be around like the little bit over than 6 foot, and women's are going to be 5'6", and kids are going to be 4'2" or 4'3".
Excellent, that's really helpful. And tell me about your signage that you also have shown in this image. Is that going to be a cast sign, or is that a metal sign?
the square box, are we? Yeah,
Correct, in
that
between
is-
your two sculptures.
is the voting box, and it is going to, it is, the woman is going to, I'll send that image as well, so we have the basic drawing. So basically, Berge find like just the images from that. These are not actual pose of the sculptures. So one of the woman is going to bend a little bit to voting into this box. The other one is right behind and waiting. And Atatürk is also showing those signs to kids saying that, and that we will be having some writings, when these rights given to the woman and our alphabet on one side. So we'll show the future of the Turkey, the new republic.
Excellent. And I know other gardens are incorporating some educational signs to help educate the general public on all of this, wonderful history. Do you have educational signs incorporated? I apologize if I missed it.
So Mehmet Gencer, he has ideas, so he can share.
I first of all, yeah, I think that's a great question. We went through that to do a lot of writing, and in the current gardens that's done. And one of the things in cultural garden now, we are going beyond that. I mean, some signage will be also in the gardens, in the upcoming gardens, but in existing and future gardens, we will have actually. Paul can help me out with that technology. Now I can't bring it, but then it will be ready that on your phone as you are standing, let's say on an Atatürk, and it will talk about Atatürk. And then when we
QR
talk,
code scan so that people can pull it up on their phone.
So it's gonna be pulled by the phone. So that way we are gonna be sticking with the technology, not so much writing, and we are finding out those writings are not really, although they are educational, they are not really read by the majority. People look at and ourselves too. You have so much time, you go, you learn a little bit, but then I think that little bit will be covered in terms of what's available there. That's why we are raising questions, alphabet. A lot of times I'm in the gardens most of the time when I'm working, like Friday, I'll be there to get ready for One World Day. People stop by and ask questions. Why is this? And then on the welcome, there's the alphabet, and they say, "Oh, we thought Turkey doesn't have alphabet." So that's why there are those 29 letters, Western alphabet on that crescent, and there will be a lot of message, intriguing things like tulip, and then tulip questions come. Why tulip in Turkey? But then tulip started in that part of the, not started, I mean, biologically, I mean, theologically.
Right.
The Turks didn't start it. So there will be those, and then excellent question, and we are becoming up with the technology, and all the gardens will have that.
Excellent. And I think, incorporating that into the sculptures, or, we'd want to, once you define and solidify your approach of using the technology, we want you to resubmit how you're going to apply the QR codes to either the sculptures or the installation with the alphabet and so forth. So I think it's a great way to do very discrete education, but we just want to make sure the execution, looks good too. So as you continue that development, I think that's aligned with other gardens also throughout the cultural gardens. We just want to see how you're going to, what's the execution of that.
Yes, yes, certainly.
I'm going to open up the floor to other commission members to ask questions. Mr. Strickland, did you have additional questions, or was your hand still up? All right, thank you. Ms. Anderson, question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really am looking forward to seeing the improvements in this garden, including those beautiful tulips and daffodils in the springtime. you know, so there's a lot that I embrace here. I really am excited to see the messaging coming from the interpretive materials there, and yeah, in fact, that when this was presented as a concept, I did a little bit of reading on Ataturk and his contributions to Turkey and his modernization of Turkey. And I'm really excited about this message being presented to the public here. Now, as I recall, we saw this as a concept, and at the time I had some concerns about the quality of the sculpture, but we never actually voted on that because you know, you'd mentioned that the sculptor had taken ill, and sadly he has passed. But I feel like this is already completed, basically, and we have not had an opportunity to address what is being erected here. And frankly, we don't even have a lot of photograph and conceptual plans being presented to us right now regarding these sculptures. So those are my concerns.
All right, thank you, Ms. Anderson. Giancarlo?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you. I think overall, Burge did a great job of the project as a whole. We had conversation in the past about the use of natural materials rather than cast concrete. I still have an issue with that, and I'll explain it further in a few minutes. But then I'm somewhat disturbed actually by the bronze, because the sculptor who passed away has a great reputation for being a bronze sculptor, bronze casting sculptor. Now I'm hearing that these may be man-made artificial materials, which is disturbing, not only because these materials don't have an historical longevity element, but also because, again, when we use the word cultural gardens, we're looking at the culture of the nation that these gardens represent. And Turkey has an ancient reputation for bronze casting. In fact, historically, they're one of the first civilizations that developed bronze casting. So it would, to me, it would be part of this idea to commemorate the material of bronze. Also, Turkey probably has one of the largest collections of natural stones in the world, ranging from limestone to marble to granite, and not using natural materials. I mean, I can see, as far as the tulip's concerned, why we may have to go to a cast concrete, because it is a complex flowing design. But the sidewalk, I think, even if it were an American stone, such as Indiana limestone that Burge mentioned, I would be happier with that. But the bronze casting not being bronze is extremely disturbing to me, and I would not approve the project because of it.
Thank you for that feedback, Giancarlo.
Can I comment for the bronze?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, if you pass other gardens that have the bronze casting, they turn into the black already, and the color the bronze is changing, and that's why we wanted to keep a consistent coloring, and that's why he worked with the university to find this new material, which is as I said, like in Michigan Ataturk Garden, there's a sculpture in there, and it didn't change the color, it didn't crack or anything. So it is like the very good quality material. It is not just, that's why we didn't want to just go to the bronze. And this, as you said, in Turkey, every school has the Atatürk sculpture in front of there, and it is very cheap in Turkey. You can get like this 5 in Turkey with $5,000. And it is not, we didn't want to go that route, and we wanted to get something customized and this quality material.
Well, I'm not sure where you're getting your information from, but it is totally incorrect. We have bronzes at the Cleveland Museum of Art that are over 2,000 years old, and they're still perfectly green or perfectly brown as they were patined and back then. So the idea that bronze is going to turn black is completely incorrect. So I'm not sure what you're actually saying to me.
That was the idea that we saw, and that's why the sculptor suggested that one, and we trusted his expertise to go that way.
Okay. All right. What about Burge? What about the limestone? We actually discussed that in a couple of the previous meetings.
The limestone, basically, we are going to mimic.
That's what I'm saying. We're using a word that's completely inappropriate, Burge. We're going to mimic something. I'm not quite understanding.
No, not mimic, so that it's representative of a richer material. That's the whole idea.
So why are we also mimicking Turkish culture?
No, we are not.
We're not.
We are no. Basically, we are render materials that represent real materials, but that doesn't mean that we are diminishing the value. I mean, it's like, concrete is a beautiful material, but you can make with today's technology, make concrete look like stone. Am I right?
May I make a comment, Birch, when you're done?
No, I'm done, Paul.
One of the reasons the Design and Preservation Committee was open to the idea of what Birch is proposing is our experience with the maintenance of the gardens, and quite often the sandstone applications. City does the grass cutting and sort of the general park maintenance. And often, because they use small tractors for the large areas, they have to cut and run over a pathway like this would most likely be run over, and the stone gets damaged and then needs to be replaced. It's a common occurrence that many of the gardens have to deal with, and of course it's not only cost, but it's the emotional. After you complete a garden and raise money and to do so, and then there's this emotional down that there was damage, and you have to put more money into it and more fundraisers and all of that. So that's why we were open to what Burgess suggested, which is more durable, yet it will appear very much as he described.
Also, Paul, if you recall, the cost is involved as far as material. I mean, the difference between actual granite on a sub base and concrete, I mean, it's enormous cost difference. Not only that, but throughout the gardens, we have concrete paving everywhere.
I think we're trying to highlight and elevate where we can, where it's appropriate, but understand the impact on budgets is real too, based on the fundraising efforts it takes. But I do think Giancarlo's comments of trying to highlight each culture and what elements are predominant, something we do need to recognize and incorporate into the gardens also. Giancarlo, additional questions or comments?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Strickland, do you have additional questions? I see your hand still is up.
Apologize, Madam Chair. Somehow when I got into the meeting this morning, I can't see the status of my hand being up, and I can't see most of the participants that are on this.
Neither can I, actually.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
I've got some, I guess everybody's having technical issues this morning and I count myself among those.
Not a problem.
Thanks.
Yeah, I had the raised hand problem last meeting.
That's right. Okay, well, any additional questions or comments from the commission, or would someone like to make a motion?
Julie, Madam Chair, could I recommend something to you? I propose that we would look to the sculpture assembly as another issue that we will be submitting to you at a later date, so that the sculptural assembly should not be part of this vote. Is that reasonable?
That was going to be my recommendation here in a second, is that I think we need more information, as mentioned, on the signage. Yeah, if there's going to be more, once it's determined and how it will be incorporated into the installation, I would also recommend the sculpture to be presented at a future date for approval. But as Ms. Anderson mentioned, I think this has to be resolved fairly quickly because you have it under fabrication or fabricated. So before it can be installed, it will have to come forward for approval.
I have one more question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Regarding the sculptures, I think I'm curious now is because originally the sculptor that passed away has a very prominent reputation for casting bronze. So I'm wondering if the pieces if there any of the pieces were already cast before he passed away. So I'm just curious as if the pieces that are being proposed for this project, if any of them were already cast, which would be in bronze and cast bronze before he passed away. Can anybody answer that question, perhaps?
He created the sculptures with this soft material that ready to cast, and his student, like after he passed away, his student went and cast it. I asked him if they are still the material that he was talking, or he cast it with the different, like bronze, as you said. And I asked him, I'm still waiting his answer.
I see. Okay.
Because we were assuming that they used that material, but it might be casted as bronze. So we are not sure on that one. I'll after I get the information, I'll let you know.
Okay, so I think we should, I don't think I'm personally comfortable approving the sculpture at this time, similar to the signage. So my recommendation to anyone who make a motion is that is not part of the approval and needs to be submitted to staff at minimum, the materiality of the sculpture, and any additional information with photography of the proposed material so that we can address the sculpture separately along with the signage. Would someone like to make a motion? Ms. Anderson, I see your hand up. Would you like to make a motion?
Actually, I had one quick question, and I hate to bounce around so much on the topics here, but was any natural stone actually priced out, or was there any pursuit of the possibility of obtaining natural stone, so that we know that yes, it's twice as much as the cast concrete? Because it sounds like some of this concrete is a specialty product, and it might not have been, it might have been a little more expensive than a standard cast concrete. So I was just curious about that.
Yes, we did consider. That was one of the first things we consider.
And the results?
It doubled the price, more than double, actually 3 times more.
I'm just going to put this out there. These days, a lot of builders are working with natural stone, but they're usually interior finishes, like granite in the bathroom or, something like that, some marble. So, I know that these things are being produced and, maybe not in this instance, but it would be nice to see, more outreach to see about the feasibility of stone, because again, it is being used. It's not something that is such a niche specialty product out there. So I just think in the future, hopefully applicants will look into that one way or another, even if they can repurpose stone from somewhere else or, it just seems like there's a possibility of putting natural products into these gardens. It may take a little more effort, but I would like to see, I would just like to see that happen. I think would really enhance the overall look in the presentation of these, natural environments. So I just want to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. In the interest of keeping things moving forward, I think we are, at the point of reiterating some of the comments and the preferences that the natural stone is preferred over the concrete. But I think the applicant has done due diligence about the cost, or it appears that they have. And
Well,
someone like,
yeah, again, I'm not sure that the cost is 4 times as much as it is for cast concrete. I also, cast concrete, even though everybody thinks it's gonna last forever, has about a 15 to 20-year lifespan before it starts cracking and breaking. I have my church at East 33rd Street. The stairs are cast concrete. We had to repatch them and replace them 3 times in the last 15 years, whereas the stone foundation of the church, even though it's over 100 years old, is perfectly okay. So I don't know, this idea of the cast concrete is superior to stone. I'm not sure about that at all. And also the cost. I mean, I would like to see a quote for limestone, for example, versus a quote for concrete. I just think that these cultural gardens need to represent the ancient cultures of the people that we can't constantly compromise and keep using a material because it's a little less expensive.
To the chair, to the other members, I agree with all of the discussion. I'm wondering if we can move towards calling the question so that we might instruct the applicant how to come back. So I believe Chair Trot was about to make a recommendation to approve the design, but to come back for the sculpture. Is that accurate?
and the signage, yes.
And the signage.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So
So
it's on-
I can make a motion to approve the design with the condition that the applicant returns with a final signage and sculpture, including a further exploration of the natural materials discussed today.
Thank you for the motion, Director Wong. Do we have a second?
I would second that motion. The motion.
Thank you, Giancarlo. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonesi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trot.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
So we look forward to seeing more information on the sculpture and the signage, and appreciate you considering, the exploration of the natural materials.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes that portion of our certificates of appropriateness. We move on to concept plans for an additional cultural garden. The French Garden located at 1520 Martin Luther King Drive, new garden plan.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Larry Miller. I am the president of the French American Chamber of Commerce here in Ohio. And this is a project of the French American Chamber and its foundation. We have two legal entities, the Chamber and the Foundation. And those two entities provide business and cultural connections between Cleveland and France, especially with our sister city, Rouen, in Normandy. So I have with me today on the call, I can't see who's on the call and who isn't, but Michelle Nwafo is the president of our foundation. Cedric LaRouge is a board member of the foundation and the chamber. He's also the executive director of the chamber, and he is the honorary consul of France to Northern Ohio. We have Eric Novello, who's a member of our committee. And we have engaged an architect, Richard Levitz, who's well known in Cleveland. I know Richard had a conflict, so I'm not sure if he's still on the call or not. And we
Still here for a bit.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I'll pass it over to you very quickly. And then we engaged the landscape architecture firm of DERU, specifically Jamie Schwartzberg, who has been helping us with the landscape architecture. So Richard and Jamie are going to present in a minute. But the one thing I wanted to say is that the concepts and the driving principles for us that have driven this project and driven our design, we think it's been, it's a long time. The cultural gardens as a whole, we thought it's important that there be a French garden because France has made such an important cultural contribution to world culture. So we wanted to honor that cultural heritage. We also wanted to respect the spirit of the other cultural gardens, and we wanted to respect the land and the topography of the site that has been offered to us by the Federation. We also wanted to provide a space that is welcoming and living for the local community and for visitors and passersby to the area. So that's what we have thought about, and we presented our initial concept to planning back in December. We presented this plan that you will see today to the Federation a few weeks ago, and they approved it. And so with no further ado, I think I'm going to ask Richard and Jamie to present the plan.
Good morning, everyone. I will first quickly go through a few of the guidelines that became the basis of our design process and approach, and then Jamie will present the design. So first, it was important to represent in the design French culture and history. Make a connection between Cleveland and its sister city of Rouen, capital of the northern region of Normandy. It was important creating a welcoming design to the surrounding neighborhood, and this is particular at the top corner of the site at Ansel and Wade, making this a community garden so that it's welcoming to the neighborhood. Programming of the garden for activities that can be enjoyed by individuals and or large groups, everyday seasonal events, and holidays. Design with consideration of the existing steep topography. It's rather steep. And that was very important in the way that the design was put together. And also consider local flora that may relate to French topography and flora. And finally, express both the French formal classical landscape design together with the more casual French provincial countryside landscape design. And from there, Jamie?
Thank you, Richard. Next slide, please. So when we dove into this French cultural garden, we were a little bit presented with an embarrassment of riches and we looked at everything from the, as Richard said, the classical French garden styles to more provincial gardens, the way that they grow grapes, which is so kind of iconic of parts of France, the tradition of the Allée of Trees, and even the word garden is actually comes to English from French, from the word jardin. So French is sort of has this kind of really, really beautiful, rich, deep garden tradition that we were able to be inspired by and pull from. Next slide. This is some of the more regional French areas. So there are the lavender fields of Provence. There are the more mountainous gardens of the Pyrenees. There's the beautiful sort of Mediterranean site. We really had a lovely amount to choose from. Next slide. I think the next slide is because of the steepness of our site, we really looked closely at a lot of these hillside and terrace gardens, very traditional materials, the traditional way that they dealt with the slopes, that they stabilized them. And I think the important takeaway in some sense is the real embracing of the structural kind of, I think that's one thing French gardens are famous for, is their real strong structural architectural elements. Next slide. We also looked at all the iconic and cultural important influences of France, everything from things you might not know, like Braille is a French invention. Also, denim comes from France, from denim. We looked at the beautiful cafe culture. We looked at art and fashion and coffee. We looked at all the beautiful ironwork that is a very strong French tradition, the architecture, and also we looked at the way the Cleveland Clinic actually was founded in Rouen. That a group of Cleveland doctors went to Rouen to work in World War I and came up with the idea for the Cleveland Clinic. So there's kind of beautiful both things that have influenced the whole world, but also things that have really been personal for Cleveland. Next slide. So yeah, how do we get all that into one garden? This is our location. It is just off Wade Park Avenue, so we kind of lucked out. We've got the Wade Park Bridge in the background of our site, but this is also when you're coming from University Circle. Other than the Chinese garden, this is really the first garden you'll encounter as the main grouping of gardens. And when you're coming from the highway heading towards University Circle, you get this beautiful view as you round the curve of the bridge and that kind of point of our site as it intersects with the off-ramp. So we really tried to take advantage of both of those opportunities. Next slide. This is pictures of the existing site. We have some lovely mature trees on the site. You can also see in the bottom left, we've got some trees that have died and in kind of midpoint of the site, and that actually gives us an opportunity to take those dead trees out and have a little bit of space to play with some of the topography where it's steep or unmanageable. But we've really, for the most part, tried to work with the topography. I think in the end, we're proposing one tree come out in all of this. Next slide. More pictures of the existing site. You can see the bridge, the steepness. Next slide. So this is our proposed site plan, and I'll go through it in more detail from north to south. So we'll start at the intersection of the off-ramp and MLK, and then we'll work over to the left. But you can see the overall, the goal is to take advantage of all the different parts of the site and the different ways that the topography kind of offers different opportunities. Next slide. So this first section is would be our lower sign and flag, so introduction to the garden as you're coming from the north. This is our Water Lily Bridge bike station. So this is both inspired by the Impressionists, Monet's Water Lily Bridge, and also the kind of very robust bike culture in France. And we talked about the Tour de France. So there aren't a lot of places. We talked about how we get people to stop in the garden and how we make the garden a really usable space. This is really adjacent to a lot of neighborhoods. And so, and we're also adjacent to the Harrison Dillard Bike Trail. So we're proposing a bike station here with bike racks that are integrated into a sort of replica of the Water Lily Bridge made of powder coated steel, and a bike repair station and seating, and then the paving in the paving in this would be a hexagon paver. In France, it's quite common, it's quite commonly known, and it wasn't something that I was aware of, that they think of the shape of France as a hexagon. So the hexagon is very iconic in France, and so we've kind of we've touched on the hex theme throughout the garden, and you see this little bike station is shaped like a hexagon. But also we're proposing a hex paver with some special terrazzo hex pavers embedded in it to kind of mimic the water lilies in the water. We're proposing planting around the backside that sort of speaks to the planting that is in the painting you can see below on the right. So a weeping tree and some irises and some beautiful soft planting. And what we hope is that the bridge becomes a kind of beautiful sort of selfie Instagram moment for the garden where you can come, stop, have a little moment, and also take some pictures. This would be connected. So this is proposed in our first phase. I think we'll get to the phases at the end, but eventually would like to connect it to a middle entry point of the garden, which would be an art installation area of some sort. I think we felt like the tradition of art in France is so important that we really wanted that, and I think that's a future phase. We don't quite know what that art is yet. We'd like it to be a living art where the committee is interested in inviting artists to do installations. They're interested in working with the art museum. There's a lot of kind of potential. They're interested in working with art students. So we haven't quite narrowed that down yet, but the intent is that there would be a sort of something artistic front and center in the center of the garden. Next slide. So this is the big move in the garden, and I think that is what the classic French gardens are known for, is their big moves, right? They took everything and they did it 150%. And we felt like that really spoke to the gardens of France to do that here. So we're proposing a lower amphitheater area with a stage, again, hexagon shaped with the hex pavers in the stage. As you move up the steep part of the hillside, moving up to a pétanque court, and you can see that on the bottom right. So pétanque is the, we're probably in Cleveland more familiar with boules, but pétanque, pardon me, is the French version of this. And I think this was sort of reflective of the committee's desire, really, that the garden represent not just all the cultural things, or not just be a museum of people who are dead, but be a testament to the real living culture of France and the way that French people use their outdoor spaces and their gardens and their parks, and really reflective of kind of how public the French outdoor spaces are. So that, you know, really kind of encouraging this use of the garden as a entertainment spot. You can imagine that mid-hill slope terrace was a little bit challenging, but we are proposing an accessible route to get there. So we're going to talk to the city about providing a drop-off space on the ramp. The ramp is 2 lanes wide and very, very lightly used. So we want to have discussions with them about allowing a stopping place there so that there could be food trucks in the case of an event, but also that terrace is accessible to everyone who wants to congregate there, or in the event that the French have events there, that it would be open to everyone. And then moving up through a formal tree grove, so proposing to take down 1 tree, but adding a number of others in the very formal planting style of the French, without kind of adding to a maintenance burden for the gardens or the city. And then we can move to the next slide. And this is our kind of final component, which is what we're calling the community bistro. So this is the upper side of the garden. There would be a flag and a sign here as well. And then this is on the corner of Wade Park and Ansel. So there's apartments and housing all around. And then on the other side of the Wade Park Bridge, kind of catty corner, the VA dormitories. And so it was really critical in sort of thinking about this garden as a living, used place that we welcome the community in. The committee felt very strongly about this from day one, that this was an important part of the garden for them. They'd had conversations with the apartment owners on both corners. And so really this is about welcoming people in. There's an existing mature oak that's absolutely gorgeous. And we'd like to provide this little terrace underneath with the bistro style seating and tables. People can come here, hang out, enjoy the shade, play chess, have a picnic. But really it's kind of about getting people into the garden, getting people down onto MLK, and really kind of providing that connection into the park that so many of the communities adjacent to the park don't have right now. Next slide. This is a rendered view of the garden. So you can see the art area there in the center. The benches we're proposing to use are the green classic Parisian park bench that you see everywhere around Paris. And then you can see the terraced amphitheater area with the Petanque terrace in the background in the formal grove of trees. Next slide. Yeah, so this is where we were talking about. So currently fundraising is in process for phase 1A and 1B, the 2 corners. I think we felt like those were both sort of quick and achievable from a budget standpoint, but also kind of set the tone at the corners. And then the fundraising, which is going to be obviously a bit more extensive for the hillside phase, can kind of, we anticipate is going to take a little bit more time. And the art installation phase was kind of a little bit unsure, and that depends on how excited donors are about that opportunity to kind of really have some living art installations in the garden. I think that's our last slide. I'm not sure. Is there one more? Yep. Oh, and this is our letter of approval from the Federation, since Lori could not be with us today. I'd be happy to take questions.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. I think this is a very thorough, thoughtful installation here. I think you really highlighted much of the French culture, and I really do like how you have provided different installations in the entire garden to recognize different aspects of the culture. Before I continue on with the turning it over to the commission, Mr. Burek, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step over your feedback.
Hello, everybody. Again, Lori is tied up at the one day. So the Design and Preservation Commission unanimously passed the conceptual design. We're quite excited about it. Again, it is a challenging site with high elevation change. I think they grasped or utilized that to their advantage. One of the comments that was at the commission is whether there would be any opportunities to represent some of the significant personalities that Friends has, so many. And the conclusion was that the wall by the court, I'm not sure I have the name properly, would be a great opportunity to list whether it's name or description or facial engraving of some of the personalities they may want to highlight. Because one of the things that the gardens want to do is if a visitor comes and walks through the garden, we want that person to come out a little more educated about the country, with a little more knowledge. And so often people recognize the names, but they're not maybe sure what country the philosopher, poet, artist, or so came from, and this is the opportunity. We were kind of excited about the art installation portion of it. It's a novel approach of having changing art, and the visibility is at the prime location there, that thousands of cars driving by could grasp the art installation and it could change. So I think that's a like I said, novel and a great idea, as is the entrance, the community entrance part of it. It's so important to us as a federation and as a gardens to have a good relationship with the community. They can keep a lookout for the gardens. I mean, we know that sometimes bad stuff, quote unquote, happens in the gardens in terms of damage, etc. And it's so important to have the community be welcomed and participate, so that there's a nice outreach to the community, so that they feel welcome to just spend some time in the garden. So yes, we did approve it unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you for that feedback. Once again, I'm sorry I got so excited I jumped over asking for that.
It's okay. Just to try to get.
We'll now open the floor up to the commission for questions and comments. Obviously, I've already given part of mine. Are there feedback? Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was a fascinating presentation. I can see a lot of research and scholarship has went into this garden, and I think it's going to be a very exciting addition to the cultural gardens. I have a question regarding the backdrop of this garden to the south is the beautiful sandstone Schweinfurth Bridge. And I was just wondering if any consideration was made into how this garden relates to that architectural element that's already in place there. And if you could give us more information on the materials used, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. If you go, I think, to the 3D rendering, maybe, yeah, there you go. So we did really think about how the bridge functions in the background. It's beautiful stone. It's got a nice overlook, which we think is actually going to be really a beautiful overlook into the garden. And we wanted to both respect the bridge, and not get too close to it, but also kind of take it as borrowed scenery into our garden. So you can see we've really thought a lot about how that view as you come around the bend, and you get this sort of glimpse of the garden is really going to work. The intent for the walls and the structure is that they be stone, and I think our ideal is that they be French limestone or a material that looks like that. Obviously, these are our later phase gardens, so we haven't nailed down exactly what that is yet, but the intent is that they are stone clad in that hopefully that kind of golden color limestone that is very indicative of French stone. And the materials for the two first phase plazas are the hexagon paver.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. Sorry, Carlo.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to congratulate you on the wonderful presentation and the amazing photographs of various parts of the French countryside. One question is, on the bridge, which is very, very nice, will you actually have a river or a pond underneath that would grow water lilies?
No, we talked about it, but I think the Garden Federation is really discouraging water in the new gardens. Just I think from a maintenance standpoint, it's, you know.
Is there not a creek somewhere running around there?
No, and we don't even have Doan Brook on our site. It's not on this site. But so what that's why we want to use the pavers and the color of the pavers to sort of mimic water, and then use those special terrazzo pavers with the glass inlay to bring in some of that bright color of the water lilies. But it's going to be a you know, it'll be an artistic interpretation of rather than actual water.
Okay, so when you say terrazzo, are we again talking about cast concrete or an actual terrazzo?
Actual terrazzo.
Okay. And
the Hanover makes an outdoor terrazzo paver with glass
yeah,
embedded material. That's what we're proposing to use.
So yeah, so France has a beautiful limestones, probably the nicest limestones in the world.
Yes.
Are you thinking of importing the limestones from? It's done quite often. I mean, it's all kinds of architectural projects with French limestone in America. Well, is that what you're thinking of, or are you thinking of looking for an American substitute?
So I think the French limestone is our first choice. Honestly, that, you know, that's kind of how we budgeted it, but the fundraising for this portion hasn't started yet. So I think the Federation, the French group is finding a very receptive audience, and they feel like they're not going to have a huge challenge for the fundraising, but we all know that can change overnight. So
well, I think if you were to contact some of the quarries in the Dijon area, they probably would contribute the limestone. I think they would think this is a worthy cause for America, for French limestone and French history.
And we do have good support in Rouen, and we also have some very good support. There's a number of large French corporations that have their national headquarters here in Northeast Ohio. So we do have some very good, very strong connections.
So as far as this, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
As far as the sculptural area, so you don't have a specific plan for that yet, because are you showing some form of cast glass?
So we were just sort of putting a placeholder in there to kind of think about how would you do something that was impressionist. Yeah. What would that look? You may know that that's just we cribbed a Chihuly piece in there for the color. Right. But we've also, there's a strong connection with some French student groups who have in the past come over and done art pieces here in Cleveland. There's one by the, Larry, you said it's by the West Side Market, correct?
Yes.
So they do have a tradition of working with French students, coming over. We've talked about having some fashion design opportunities in this space. So yeah, I think the art is TBD right now.
No, that's a great idea. I mean, the gardens are so beautiful, and yet there are not that many participating activities, in the gardens. Well, that would be great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Can I add to that answer?
Please, of course.
Yeah, I think Jamie properly answered the question. We reserve that phase as being the last phase, but we also have in mind ways for us to have an exhibit there that could not necessarily be permanent. We hope to be able to find a way to change over time and leverage art or artists locally that could bring again more life to the garden. So we don't want to just have a permanent exhibit. So as Jamie mentioned, that space there, depending on how it's designed, we may use it for a relationship with fashion, which we know France is very known for, and look at students locally that can help to bring that to life, and some other ways to not necessarily have a permanent exhibit for that space.
Very good. Thank you.
Dr. Wong, additional questions or comments?
Thank you, Chair. And I definitely agree with everybody that this is a fantastic, thoughtful plan. I do have a question about the overall site plan and the connections. So if you could go back to that slide. First of all, I really appreciate the bike station, and it's a much needed amenity in the area, especially with that bike trail there, and with it being close to in between destinations, including the playgrounds and all of that. And I think that one question I have is regarding the community entrance closer to Wade Park. I see that there's a path that connects the Wade Park side to what looks like the access street. Is there any thought to creating a path directly from that corner? Just thinking that there could be a desire path that people might take just directly to that.
To the corner. Yeah, I think
corner,
that's
bistro.
absolutely possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they might just cut across that corner. So just for consideration of adding that extra path. But I love the overall design and theme. I'm really excited to see it come to fruition. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Wong. Ms. Anderson, did you have new feedback you wanted to give?
Just a quick comment, and maybe I missed that. Just a little more detail on the plantings. I was wondering if there was going to be any floral plantings like lavender. What kind of trees are going to be planted in that hillside phase? Just if you have any specifics, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
So in the hillside phase, the trees we're anticipating will be hornbeams, which is the kind of classic French tall columnar tree that they use for the big hedges and all the sort of it's a street tree. It's very common. We don't have the planting here developed a ton just because this is a future phase, but we're anticipating some kind of evergreen structural planting around the bottom of the stage. And then for other ways, we've kept it fairly simple for maintenance purposes, and it's really the bike station with the Impressionists that will have the most kind of flower planting. So in there, we're proposing grasses and classic irises to kind of mimic what's somewhat in the painting. it's based on a real garden in France. And then we're a weeping tree. We'd like to do a weeping willow. Maintenance doesn't love how much branches they drop, so we may have to compromise on what that weeping tree is. And then probably a maple and something smaller and flowering, which would also kind of jive with the painting. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry. I have one more quick question.
Go ahead, Giancarlo.
Will the petanque slash bocce court be functional and useful and actually used? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's going to require some maintenance as well. So you'll have some form of maintenance organization, right? So,
Yeah, the gravel surface requires some maintenance.
yeah. That's a good.
And I think they've even looked at some they're normally heavy metal balls, but they've looked at opportunities or ways to maybe have the balls available in a, I think we say they make them in a plastic or something that would be less expensive to replace.
Yeah, technically the French bocce balls or baton balls are cast steel. I have a set that I bought.
Yeah, so but a way to have them available either in the apartment buildings, in the communities nearby, or
the Italian
somehow
ones
in the
are-
garden that aren't crazy expensive to replace if they disappear.
Well, the Italians usually use either wooden ones, which are lighter, and they usually put a lead ball inside to give them a little weight. But the French ones are much more complicated, also much more interesting, but more complicated. Yes. Here. But it's a great idea. I think it's a great sport and it's a great representative of French culture.
Excellent. Well, since this is a conceptual review, do you feel that you've received enough feedback from the commission to continue the development?
I think so.
Yeah, I do. Yes. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing you continue on and bringing forward the phases as you start to move them forward.
Very good. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, we are going to now move back to certificates of appropriateness, and I believe these three projects going to be presented together or separately, Mr. Brunges or Mr. Pettit?
Madam Chair, they're all separate. I mean, they're all CMSD projects, but we should act on them separately. The third one is a concept plan, so we won't be voting on that one, but we should see these separately and act on them individually.
Okay, excellent. Then we'd like to welcome our applicant. If you would like to unmute your mic, announce yourself and tell us about your project.
Good morning. This is Zora Pavlovich with Dan Design Architecture, and I will be presenting segment 8 of CMSD projects. This one is Joseph Gallagher renovation. If I can have the next slide, please. We presented the project last week to Franklin Boulevard, West Clinton Avenue, and got approval to move forward. Next slide, please. Just an interesting fact about the area. Back in 1890s, George Tieneman built a family mansion on the corner right across from the school. The current location of the Rite Aid right on the corner of West 65th and Franklin. So it was just interesting to learn more about the history of the area. Next slide, please. So the renovation of the entire project consists of renovation from the site, all the interior, and up to the roof, including the all new systems. The original building was built in 1977 and had a small addition within the building A few classrooms were built over the Career Tech Wing back in 2000. And with this project, we are renovating and making interior reprogramming to modify the spaces to house future occupancy of 1,020 students, and creating 4 classrooms per grade level, pre-K through 8, and multiple flexible rooms within the building. Next slide, please. Just a few slides locating the area, the site within the district on a district map. Next slide. And locating the site within the existing site and land use. And as we can see, is surrounded by residential properties. Next slide. The zoning, the project is located in Ward 15, and it is zoned 2-family area District B and Height District 1. We know that the west side of the site along West 65th Street requires a 5-foot setback, and that's what we'll show in our proposal site plan. Next slide. And just this is the overall existing site of the property located between the West 65th and West 69th, Franklin Avenue on the north and Franklin Boulevard on north and Bridge Avenue on south side. Next slide. Just a few slides showing the site features of the current property. We have a reading garden on the corner. Some of you are probably very familiar with the corner of West 65th and Franklin. The next slide shows entrance into the staff parking lot, and just a few shots from Bridge Avenue. Next slide. And the student transportation currently, these are the counts from last school year. We had about 449 students that are using buses and vans. There are 12 buses and 4 vans. 79 students are using RTA buses. 150 students, approximately 557 students are being dropped off by car, and 80 students are walking to school. Next slide. And this is a proposal of our improved site plan. We worked hard with the staff and also the community and the neighbors across the street to develop the new site circulation plans. The first one shows morning arrival. What we are proposing on this site is on Franklin. In the morning, we would have cars along Franklin, creating extension of a blister lane closer to West 69th Street, and also introducing a drop-off drive in front of the main entrance. With this, we are creating additional administration parking spots. Parking on the corner of West 69th and Franklin is the staff parking, which will remain. And will be completely redone. Right off of the reading garden, we are proposing a new playground area for kindergarten students. The playground area will be open to community after school hours and will connect to the reading garden so community could enjoy both spaces. Down the West 65th, we expanded on the parking lot, created additional parking so we could have all staff and administration and faculty parked now on the site, with few additional parking spots for visitors. With this, we moved the service entrance from West 65th off of Bridge Avenue, and also created the box right next to the service entrance is the box for new transformer and mechanical open yard. Playground off of a bridge remains and is being expanded on, creating an entry point from their dining room into the playground. And buses will be lined up in the morning on bridge as they're currently the way they currently operate off a bridge. So students would take the sidewalk along the school between the green space and the school and get into the main entrance off of bridge in the morning. The green space remains. We know that this is the only green space in the area, and that is very important for the community. So we are keeping the green space, keeping the tree lawn along Franklin, and all the trees along between the parking lot and the green space. The green space will be enhanced after construction is done, new seeding, new grading, new drainage. And if we can move to the next slide. Next slide is the circulation in the afternoon at dismissal time. So in the afternoon, we just flip. So along Franklin, now we have buses lined up in the blister lane and the front drop-off drive. With this, we felt that this is a more controlled way of having kids just entering into buses and not having parents along Franklin. Parents are being, the car pickup and drop off is being proposed on bridge now. And with this, we are also creating some restrictions on West 69th Street during dismissal time only for up to 30 minutes in the afternoon. So there will be no southbound turns onto West 69th from Franklin. Right only from school parking to driveway onto 69th Street. No northbound turns on West 69th from Fur and Wakefield. So there are just few restrictions helping the parents and staff exiting from Bridge and West 69th during dismissal. Next slide, please. And this is that recommendation of the restrictions on West 69th. Next slide. Proposal of new landscape plan. At this point, we are in schematic design and don't have a landscaping list developed. However, we are showing that existing tree lawn is important and is to remain. In case any of the trees get damaged during construction, new trees will be replanted in the same spot. We are also introducing some green elements and trees between the new parking expansion and the reading garden, just to block the view from the reading garden, and introducing a green buffer zone between the neighbors and the school along West 65th Street, and also adding additional trees along Bridge. There will be a green lawn area, a small area in between the new drive, the loop and the street, and all areas will be fenced as shown in orange. We are proposing a 4-foot tall ornamental fence around the site, the green space and the playground areas, as well as a small portion of the fence would be in front of the main entrance, just to stop the students of running across the new drive and the street. The new sidewalk is also proposed across Franklin, right right between the staff parking and the new drop-off, and the sidewalks will direct students to cross the street at the designated area. Next slide. The three-story building, interior spaces are being renovated and reprogrammed for new student capacity. Next slide. Few context images from Franklin Avenue and West 65th, just showing some residential residential neighborhood. Next slide. And a few areas down Franklin Avenue. Next slide. A few images from West 69th Street. And this is the new proposed elevation along Franklin Avenue. The blue you see is a small addition we are proposing to expand under the canopy and expanding into their administration wing. The new addition is proposed to be a brick, glazed blue brick, just to bring some pop of color and change the existing very dark appearance of this building. With this addition and introduction of the color, creating some vertical elements within this very horizontal design is a bonus point, we feel. And also everything will be replaced. All windows and doors and entrances will be new. We are proposing a light bone white aluminum frames windows with translucent insulated panels and some blue tinted paneling within each opening. With this, we are just creating some interest and movement in the building and the elevation along the Franklin. Next slide, please. And this is around the corner along West 65th Street. We are also introducing a sign, so people know it is a school. And again, same window design are repeating around the building. Next slide. And these are full elevations developed along Franklin, facing West 65th, and few examples of that glazed blue brick, tinted blue glazing, and some metal panel that are located above the new punched openings within that addition, which are bone white as well, that will match the window frames. Next slide. The south elevation facing Bridge Avenue has two new window openings, which are right in the middle of the building, which is now just a brick facade. They are located on the 3rd floor in the middle of the building, and they will look the same as the rest of the building. We are introducing new windows to create and provide natural light for 2 classrooms within that space. Next slide. And this is the final slide, just showing the new entry welcome sign and the school sign above the entrance, and also the sign that was shown along the West 65th.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with feedback from the local design review committee.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was reviewed by the Franklin West Clinton Historic District Design Review Committee on August 17th. There was a lot of discussion about the color scheme of the new windows. There was discussion about the drop-off and pickup patterns. Suggestion was made to use a local artist to design and build the ornamental fence at the front of the building. There was discussion about murals, but that was basically tempered by the potential damage of a mural by painting the existing bricks. So at the end of the day, the project was approved as presented with lighting, signage, and landscaping to return to the committee.
Okay, thank you. We'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Brundges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Wong had to drop off the meeting, but she sent me some comments to read. She said she was concerned about the very tight parking spots on the pre-K side, the ones that are close to the reading garden. Can those parking spots go away or be reduced to reduce car conflicts and kid conflicts? That was her comments. I know I had mentioned in an email about that same location, potentially because there's a bike lane that comes down West 65th, maybe making this a one-way exit only rather than a two-way. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brundges. Mr. Brundges, would the applicant like to respond to that before we move on to other commission comments?
So we could look into making that one way, that's for sure. And I think we're just talking about the 4 parking spots along the reading garden. Reducing any parking is obviously reducing parking for staff and administration, but we can take a look at that, of course.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments from the commission? I would echo the comments on the pre-K. That was one of the questions that I had. Also, knowing the biking in this area. I mean, I think this is a very delicate updates to the building. I like how you worked within the envelope and tried to make modesty and additions. And try to incorporate some color into the building itself. I appreciate you trying to address the parking issues in this area because I know it is an issue, and trying to provide dedicated areas for both pickup versus busing. Overall, I'm in support of it, but do agree with the comments about the pre-K parking should also be addressed so that you don't have conflicts with bikers in the future.
Yes, we can create one way and eliminate the 4 stalls along the reading garden.
Perfect. Other questions or comments? Not seeing any questions or comments from the commission. Would someone like to make a motion with the conditions that were outlined or have been discussed and feedback from the local committee? Someone like to make a motion? Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness for the design as presented, but you'll have to, with the making of the drive onto West 65th one way and eliminating the 4 parking stalls adjacent to the reading garden. And could you review again the comments from the design review committee?
The landscaping, lighting, and signage will have to be submitted for approval at a future date. And then finally, the consideration for the fencing to be fabricated by a local artist.
Okay, so I would attach those as conditions to my motion.
Okay, thank you for the motion. Do we have a second?
This is Alan. I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dryer. Any further discussion? Right, Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonesi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio, Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trot.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Excellent, thank you. We look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next applicant, located at 1422 West 74th Street, the Waterson Lake School demolition. The applicant would like to unmute your mic, announce yourself, and tell us about your project.
Jeff, we can't hear you. You're unmuted, but your speaker doesn't seem to be working.
Can you get it to work? No?
Still can't hear you there. Microphone.
Can we suggest that he call in via cell phone?
Yeah, he could do that.
If you have the number there, Jeff, you can try to log in on your cell.
Give him another minute. Try to connect so we can hear him. And see him feverishly dialing.
Madam Chair, while we're waiting, we conducted a site visit with members of the Northwest Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation and members of the local design review committee. We walked through the entire building. I didn't include any photo documentation here, but it's a school and looks like a school should. Was able to actually document some of the artwork that had been done by students over the years. So I do have photographs of that for the record. And I think staff would, knowing that there's supposed to be long-term development on this site, that staff would support the demolition.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Prentice, for that summary. Do you have any photographs you could share while we're waiting for the applicant to connect? That we should
Not
see?
at this time. Yeah, I think it'll probably be in their presentation.
Okay. And we are.
Madam Chair, this is Bob Strickland. My daughter happens to live on West Clinton, and I visited her earlier this week, and she was telling me about a community meeting that she and her husband attended, looking for community input with regard to the demolition of the school. So as we're waiting, I can share with the commission that the intent is for the school district to transfer ownership of this parcel for development of low-income housing. So typically, we look for a schematic design or concept design of what is proposed for this site. But as I understand it, at this point, the city is developing an RFP to go out to the development community for the receipt of proposals from area developers to convert this site to low-income housing. So that's what I understand in terms of future development of this parcel.
I see we have Mrs. Delasante with us from the Cleveland School District. Would you like to give a little feedback while we're waiting for connection? Yes, I saw she was.
Hi, this is Holly. Yes, that is all true.
Well, in the interest of time, just to try to, I think we might want to, since we haven't gotten into the presentation yet, can we move on to the next applicant, the conceptual design, and come back to this application?
Madam Chair, it's the same presenter, unfortunately. So we can't skip to the concept design yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Hey, Carl, why don't you jump back to the initial presentation?
I apologize.
Not a
I had
problem.
I don't know what was the technology.
Technology, that's all you have to say. So now that we can hear, please go forward to move forward and tell us about your proposal.
Okay. So this is for the demolition of what's Waterston Lake School. And this slide kind of shows you the location right on Detroit and between West 74th and West 75th. And the original, there's been a school on this corner for 100 years. The original building was constructed in 1912. And then there was an addition that was built in the 1970s. The original building then, the one right on the corner, was torn down in 2015. So the 70s building remains on the site. And you can see that green space up along Detroit is was where the original Waterston Lake School was, and it was connected to the addition. So you could move to the next slide. Just this, or obviously the orientation is shifted here. The existing building is in the orange, and it's the demolition of the building and everything on the site. So all the parking areas, which are to the south of the building, as well as that small parking area to the north in that sort of notch area, is intended to be demolished. Now, this is part of a with the community. I think this was with CMSD and a land swap, essentially, with school property and city property. And this property, I believe now, is actually all in city's ownership, or at least in the final stages of that, and to be redeveloped. And Councilwoman Spencer has been very involved in community engagement on ideas on what would happen with this site. But at this point, there's nothing nothing to share in terms of what the intent of the new development would be. So this is strictly the removal of all the existing structure and parking on the site. So next slide. Okay, that's just it. You go on next slide again. So these are just photographs of the existing building. On the top right or top left is the front of the building, essentially on West 74th. That faces West Clinton. And then the view from Detroit, which shows the open space to the north of the building. Then the south, on the lower left, is the south elevation with the parking lot. And then on the west elevation on 75th Street, West 75th, shows the three-story building there. Next slide, just more context. Views sort of out of the site. View down West Clinton from the front entrance of the building on the upper left, and just various views along streets that front both the east and the west property lines. And then looking to the south and the buildings that are adjacent to the property to the south in the parking lot. Next slide. Again, there's two playgrounds that are currently on the site. And again, views up 75th. And again, just various views of what's there. Now, one of the comments from design review was about tree preservation plan, which we actually have now. But that one tree that's shows up in that lower left photograph is a red oak, which the hope is that we can keep that tree. It's, you know, it's near the sidewalk. It's also somewhat near the building. I think that's really the only tree on the site that could be saved. Everything else is right adjacent to the building, literally up against the building. And so none of those trees, you know, could be saved. So that's one that potentially we could save in the demolition. Next slide. Okay, this was just just to show kind of how we used some of the actually original Waterston Lake. That was when it was taken down. There was a lot of recovery, salvaging of the existing terracotta pieces, the arches that were part of that. And we utilized them, one of them in the new Waverly School. So this is sort of an outdoor learning, reading area. And we used one of the arches from that school and incorporated into the new building. So just the idea that, you know, some of that, those details and materials have been reused. So that's the end of the presentation.
Okay. Before we jump into commission questions and comments, can we hear from the local design review committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was reviewed by the Gordon Square Design Review Committee on August 10th. Just want to note that Phil Kidd of Northwest Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation was in attendance. He said that the CDC has no objection to proceeding with the demolition. They abstained from further comments since they may be bidding on the RFP. And they have drafted a tree preservation plan letter to CMSD at their request. The committee approved the demolition with the following conditions: that an interim site plan showing the clean grade and seed condition be submitted, that a tree preservation plan is submitted. They recommended retaining the oak tree on West 75th Street at the drop-off that Mr. Henderson just referenced. They asked for consideration to keeping the existing playground equipment on the site. They recommend maintaining the site as an open environment of green space for community enjoyment, and consideration of a plan for maintenance of the site if the property transfers. One of the members also added a recommendation to identify any placards or other interior signs for salvage, identifying the building, notable alumni or the school's namesake, to provide information regarding the name of the school and its relevance to the community. So that was the approval with the conditions and recommendations. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. We'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Guess I'll start us off. I'm sorry if I missed this. How many students currently attend the school?
Holly, do you know the answer to that?
Or I guess I'll add to my question, maybe make it easier to answer. What is the plan for the students that currently attend this in the future?
This is closed. It's been closed for a few years. We moved those students over to the new building.
So it's a vacant building currently?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And what is the length of time from this application for demolition to when you're pursuing or putting out an RFP for redevelopment of the site?
I can't answer that question. We're actually not involved in that part of it. That will be the city that will be handling all the redevelopment. So our responsibility as the school district is to just get rid of the site or get rid of the building and, you know, have a clean site. At that point, it's in the city's hands to develop it further.
I see. Okay, that is helpful. Thank you. Those are my questions right now. Ms. Anderson?
I just want to give a quick history here. the original 1912 building was gorgeous. It was a beautiful building. There were numerous attempts made to reutilize the building, but because of the cost of things like asbestos abatement and the fact that the neighborhood was still pretty depressed at the time, it just wasn't economically feasible, and it fell into great disrepair and ended up having to be torn down in, what was it, 2015. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. It was a beautiful structure, but not in great condition. Other questions or comments from the commission? Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given that this property is being transferred from the school district to the city of Cleveland for redevelopment, I think it's not realistic to think that we could entertain some of the recommendations from the local design review, such as maintaining the playground equipment or establishing some signage or anything, talking about the history of the site and the history of the school. So I just think that those recommendations, is, being well-meaning, but are not realistic to include as conditions if we approve the demolition of the school.
Is it the intentions to remove the playgrounds when the building demolition occurs?
Yes.
And that's so that you don't have, so you have the clean site for the city. Is the equipment going to be repurposed in other areas in the neighborhood or removed and stored for future reuse?
I think, well, Holly, you can probably respond to that. I think there was someone that was interested in purchasing it for reuse.
Yeah, this is Holly. So we have a charter school that is going to potentially occupy a building that's underutilized in the district. They did show interest in having this playground relocated to that site. But we did install 2 new playgrounds at the new school for the neighborhood. So hopefully that helps.
Excellent, that does help. Thank you. Mr. Strickland, do you have additional questions before I move on, or comments?
No, Madam Chair, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brungers, give your hand up.
Yes, Madam Chair. With the RF, this will have to come back to us for review when it comes through. And I think committees, maybe we put that as part of the recommendation from the committee later to somehow honor the school building later through our design review process. It's just put this into the back of the head, and maybe that's one of the elements that goes into the RFP to say that there should be some sort of element that honors the history of the site and references Waterston Lake. And that's something because it's the community development department that's going to be issuing that RFP, but it hasn't been finalized yet. Thank you.
I think that's a great suggestion. Mr. Pettit, did you have additional feedback?
I was just going to clarify the recommendation about signage and placards. There's really no salvage plan for the building, and I think that's because there's not much to salvage here. It was the intent of the design review committee just to do another sweep of the building to see if there's anything inside it that might reference the history and the individuals who contributed to the building, as potential salvage items. That's all.
Okay. So I didn't hear that as part of their recommendations, a salvage plan. Was that one of their requirements?
No, they're not. The school district is not proposing a salvage plan because there's basically nothing here
to salvage.
salvage except the basic materials. That, you know, this isn't an architecturally ornamental building. It's you know, it's a mid-century modern building, so it's, you know, it's basically the form of the building that conveys the character. So there's no plan for salvage, and I don't think we expect one in this case.
No.
So it feels like the only thing that from the recommendations from the committee that is applicable to this review would be the need for a maintenance plan for the interim between the demolition to when a new proposal would be put forward for the property. Do you agree? Or is the land transfer happening immediately after the demolition?
I think the property is being transferred right away.
Okay. Well, I do think it is required because I don't think the neighborhood wants, you know, this to be a further, like right now, the school and the maintenance of the areas aren't detracting from the neighborhood, but if this is not cared for, it will be into, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So questions or comments from the commission, or someone like to put forward a motion? Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I move to approve the demolition of the school with the condition that the one tree on West 74th, is that 74th or 75th?
75th.
75th be maintained, and that a overall tree preservation plan be developed as applicable, and that the city of Cleveland then bears a responsibility after land transfer to maintain the site until its future development.
Would you consider adding the consideration of adding the committee's recommendations to the RFP requirements?
Excluding the maintenance of the playground?
Correct.
Yeah, I would say that, excuse me, what Carl suggested is that possibly elements of that being suggested to be included in the RFP in terms of documenting the history of the site and the presence of the school. Somehow that be communicated to the Community Development Corporation for inclusion in the RFP.
Thank you for that motion and those conditions and considerations. Do you have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonesi,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. We look forward to the redevelopment of this site.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our certificates of appropriateness round 2. We'll now move into concept plans. And we will be reviewing the properties located at 1468 West 98th Street, the new construction of the Marion Seltzer School.
Good morning once again. I'll be presenting this for the new Marion C. Seltzer pre-K 8 school. Go to the next slide. And just the summary here, it's actually it's 450 students. That says 690, but it's actually 450. pre-K through 8th grade. And the size of the building is about 63,280 square feet, which is a relatively small building. These are the smallest ones that we build for the district with the 450 fifth students. But basically 2 classrooms per grade, and then sort of all the connected functions that go along with the school. We're providing 50 parking spaces on site. Currently, they don't have that many on site, but the new design will have all the parking within the school property and not have to use the street or surrounding areas. So you can go to the next slide. Just site location in the Cadell neighborhood, right at Detroit and West Boulevard, basically, and the Cadell Rec Center. Go to the next slide. Just shows the property. Now, this is one of the properties that were associated with the Waterston Lake because this is where some of the property exchange happened. The site of the existing school, which is kind of in sort of the lower middle of that piece, was really small. And so the city, in an exchange, gave, in exchange for Waterston, we gained property here, which really is to the west of the existing school and to the north. And the heavy red line represents what that property line is now. And you can see that has sort of a cutout there where the Cadell Tower, clock tower is, which is still on city property. So the project really is it's very much a collaborative effort with the city. And we've had numerous meetings with the city between the rec center and the school. And I think Jim McKnight is on the call this morning. But in any case, you can go to the next slide. This kind of shows it within the historic district and the shape of that property. The next slide. Zoning wise, it's in multifamily. So again, we need to go and get variances or for conditional use for a school, even though it's been a school for a long time. We still are required to go get zoning variances for conditional use. And typically parking is another one where we get a variance from the number of spaces we always design to accommodate visitors and staff for the school. And it's typically less than what zoning would require. So we always have to get a variance on that. Next slide. Just same thing. Next slide. You can go to the next one. And again, you saw this on Gallagher, where it's just sort of an analysis of where students come from, what they access to get to school. It just gives us an idea of what we need to plan for with students coming in various means of transportation. In this case, we only have 5 buses that serve this school. About 50 students are dropped off by their parents. A lot of students are walking, so they're from the neighborhood, about 100. And at that point, there was only 5 students that took RTA to get to the school. So it gives us a sense of where kids are coming from and how we might have to accommodate that in the new design. Next slide. So this shows kind of an aerial of the site, which includes the rec center, which is in the upper left of that sort of open space there. The clock tower is the little orange square up in the upper area. The Tamir Rice Memorial Garden is down in the other orange little highlighted area next to the parking lot at the Cadell Rec Center. The sort of shaded white then kind of gets you, and again, shows you what the site is school property wise, and sort of the sharing of space, physical space between the school and the rec center, which is kind of important in terms of what we've done from a site plan standpoint. Right now, all of the West 98th, which is on the right-hand side of the site, is a one-way to the south. So all the traffic loops around, comes up off Madison and loops around and comes down. And that's where right now all of the buses and all the parents drop off on West 98th to the school. They also, there's also use of the Cadell parking lot, principally in the afternoon. But I think one of the, in the agreement between the city and the school with this property, that the school, they both get sort of non-exclusive use of the site, of the parking area, the Cadell Rec parking area during school days, so that it can continue to be utilized by parents and staff as they need to. So I think currently in the afternoon, parents use the Cadell Rec parking lot to pick up their students. So just to kind of alleviate, it's always an issue with all of the schools, particularly on these small city sites, transportation, and everybody understands that it's, in the morning and the afternoon are the two kind of rush periods where traffic can be kind of a real big concern. They typically last about 45 minutes and then it's gone. But, in that 45 minutes, it can, can be very chaotic. So it's always an important thing for us to think about how we can improve that, as it were, in most of these sites. Go to the next slide. So just some context photos of the site. So this is the Tamir Rice Garden, the newly renovated memorial garden. Some pictures of that. On the lower left, of course, is looking north next to the garden towards the rec center, and you can see the tower that's in the background there. And of course, the tower on the lower right, and the large green space, which right now is an open area, and you'll see that the school is going to take over part of that. And one of the requirements for this whole project is that we need to provide another space. Another space needs to be provided within the complex, essentially, to offer that large open play area, field, soccer field, whatever it might be, within the site. So we worked with Jim McKnight and developing kind of our site plan and their site plan, and kind of coming with, again, at this point, a preliminary concept of how we think the entire site will function. So, and I'll show you that in a second. Next slide, again, just additional, there's the clock tower, which is in honor of Frank Cadell, or in memory of him, from his wife. I think it was 1917 is when it was built. And, it's a very important piece to the space, but also, as you'll see, because of its proximity to the new building, that it always was a really important piece for us to reference in the kind of how we approach the design of the building, particularly on the elevations. So it's obviously a very important piece right now. Next slide is the rec center. So again, it's sort of the other component here, which we always had to we have to pay attention to, because it creates an edge on this sort of space. And so it's important consideration for, creating that sort of common space that's in between the rec center and what will be the new school. So an important piece. Next slide. I think just some context then. Upper left is looking down 98th towards Madison. So that's kind of the brick road that's there now, and that's sort of the main drop-off area that happens. To the right of that is kind of a view from Detroit looking towards the tower, which really right now is all kind of hidden in the trees. But that's that area that's just off of Detroit. The lower is, again, I think that's looking across the basketball courts and then towards the existing building, kind of in the distance there. Again, kind of sort of at Detroit and looking south. And again, on the lower right is kind of looking at that open field in front of the basketball courts and looking south toward the existing school building. Next slide. Then these are sort of on the south side of the site. Playground that's existing there next to the school, and also next to the garden. Now, on the right-hand side, upper right, is just looking down West 99th towards Madison. So the school is off to the left, and that's just looking towards looking south towards Madison. Lower left is kind of behind the school, between the school and the fire station that's on Madison. So just the space that's there. And then looking west, kind of look towards the parking lot, and then the play fields that are the baseball field that is to the south of the parking lot there. So just some context photos of the site. So this is the developed site plan. Preliminary site plan that we've developed. As one of the big things was trying to maintain as much of that sort of community space, I'll call it, the space in between the two buildings. And you can see the orange line that runs around is the property line for this between the school and the city property, and it kind of bisects that middle part right in front of the Cadell Rec Center. But it's always we were always trying to maximize that as much as we could, which really pushes the building as close to West 98th as we could get it, and try to maximize that internal kind of community space. The building, one of the restrictions on this project is that the existing building needs to stay in place while this building is being built. So it happens numerous times with the district, and the existing building is shown in that kind of blue outline on that lower parking area. So that shows how that's the footprint of the existing building. And we need to be essentially 30 feet away from that to the north to allow for construction to happen. And that's sort of really restricted where we could place the building. The building is a two-story building. So there's the academic wing is a two-story, you'll see that. But we tried to get as close to 98th as we could to kind of maximize that common space between the rec center. And it really pulls in, on the two sides, obviously, the two buildings. On the north side is the clock tower that kind of defines that upper edge, and that sort of park-like space that's there now. It's kind of a rambling thing now with the sort of asphalt and various things that they've done over the years in that space. And I think part of the idea is that that could be cleaned up or rethought about in terms of this. Now, that wouldn't be part of our project. That would be part of the city's project. But you can see how close the tower is to the end of our building, to the side of the building, which is, I think it's around 46 feet as it's drawn currently. So it's, it's a fairly close relationship, which for us was like, that's really part of the elevation of the building. You can see the new Tamir Rice Garden kind of in the middle there in the sort of orange. One of the, we had a couple meetings with Miss Rice and showing her some various schemes that we had, including this one. But one of the things that she really was interested in having was a playground that was adjacent to the garden. She really wanted that activity to be next to the garden. There is a playground there now that's kind of right next to that. So that was kind of an important thing to her. So that yellow area indicates the playground area. But again, I will tell you that it doesn't go across onto city property. So that's the drawing isn't quite correct. It would stop there at essentially at the school property line. And then that would just be grass area on the other side of that. But that being adjacent to the Memorial Garden was really important to her. And it works out plan-wise for the school because the student dining is the piece that's really that from the school districts, they want to connect, their main playground is connected to the student dining. So that happens in that location, which also allows the opportunity for the building to kind of have windows out looking that direction. So again, they're sort of overlooking the Memorial Garden. So there's a lot of connection between what happens in the school and what happens outside. The other thing I would say is that on the north end, on north of the tower, there will also be a playground that's not indicated there, but the pre-K playground is, again, located right adjacent to the pre-kindergarten and kindergarten classrooms. We're at the north end of that wing. And so there'll be another play area that's up at that end of the building that's not indicated on this drawing. As we move south then, the main entrance actually is in the middle of the south elevation or the south wall of the building, I'll say. That's where the main entrance is sort of in the middle there. So it kind of splits its sort of orientation both to West 98th and to the rec center parking, which students will be coming or going in both directions. So it kind of centralizes that, which works really well. And then the parking, again, below that is enough to accommodate all the staff and all visitors, handicap parking. The other thing that happens with this plan is because we've connected to West 99th, which is that little loop that just comes to the west of the firehouse. We're connecting there, and what we're doing is bringing the buses. Again, there's only 5 buses that are here currently, so we're bringing the buses off the street, off of 98th, onto CMSD property, and that will be where they will drop off. Their students would be on school property. So they're not. So we take that kind of at least one component of that traffic off of 98th and get it onto the site. And again, this will be a sequence thing because they'll build a new building, and then once they actually literally have to open the building, and then they will go and do demo that building and do the improvements to the south side there with the parking lot and the connection will happen after the new building is up and occupied. So one of the things that you will see that we've kind of built across that large open kind of field space that's in front of the rec center now. So again, as I mentioned, that we needed to replace that or have an equivalent thing on site so we're not losing anything. So that was, you'll see that multi-purpose field on the south side. It sort of intersects with the baseball field. But and so again, sort of spans across both the city property and the school property. But provides that sort of athletic kind of field, athletic kind of facility there on the south side. What's interesting about that is we sort of created 2 spaces where there was really kind of one space before, right in front of the rec center. Now we sort of created this, I would say, more of a passive space around the clock tower, and I think I call it a community gathering space or something. But it's could potentially be more of park-like, more of a passive kind of space in that upper area between the buildings and the clock tower, and then have sort of this more active space on the south side of that. We also, those basketball courts that are up there that are just to the east of the clock tower would move to the blue area that you see just west of the baseball field. So there's some shifting of some facilities that happen. So we make sure that we're not losing any of that sort of that active, the activities on the site, and kind of maximizing everything that we can, optimizing everything that we can. We'll move on to the next slide. Sort of a landscape plan, but it's not, I think, again, the landscaping is we haven't really developed it too much, but generally the district does street trees and other things like that. They don't do a lot of planting beds or any of that because of maintenance issues. So there'll be new trees planted. We have done a tree preservation plan on this site as well. There's a lot more trees that will come down just because of the footprint of the building and the things the construction activities that are going to happen. So I have that plan that we've prepared. This also shows the fencing. So we have ornamental fencing that goes around the playground, which is that area just on the lower area, which shows orange, and then it does show it on the upper area, that little pre-KK playground, which will get fenced. One of the things that Councilwoman Spencer had suggested potentially is to make that a 6-foot fence. We typically do a 4-foot, and the way the district typically operates is they allow community use of their main playground, the one that would be adjacent to the student dining, in this case also adjacent to the garden, and not necessarily allow community use of the pre-K playground. And one of the reasons is because the size of the equipment is smaller. The things that happen in the pre-KK are smaller scale, and so they typically lock those in to kind of prevent use of that, just to protect that. But they do always allow the use of the main playground. So there will be a fence around both of them, but they will be ornamental in both cases. You can move to the next slide. I think there's a floor plan. So just this shows the floor plans. Just an idea that if the way the district always works is they allow the gymnasium, student dining, media center, all to be community use. So one of the things is that, and we want to always separate those areas from the academics. So all the academics happens, you can see on the upper part with the tan color on 2 floors, and that can be isolated from everything that's so sort of community oriented. So the gym and the student dining are located in that lower area, the public area, I would say. And the main entrance then is in sort of the middle of the bottom elevation. On the lower side there is where the main entrance, and because the green is administration, and all the secure entrance things that we do. You know, typically people can come into the main vestibule, but they can't get any farther in the building before they get buzzed in and things like that. So there's all those things that happen normally on all the school buildings that they do. Next slide. So the elevations, I think. So again, the clock tower was always the driver on this. There's a couple things that we want to take into consideration. We really wanted to kind of be a campus feel. So that means that the rec center building has some impact on that because it's there. So one of the approaches was that let's keep we want to be a cousin to that. We don't want to match it necessarily at all, but even color-wise, tone-wise, so it's a very neutral palette. And then you can see how the tower sits in front of the academic wing. So there was a thought of how do we highlight that. We don't want to we don't want to kind of overpower it with anything. We sort of looked at what we're showing here is kind of a horizontal patterning of brick, which in some ways contrasts with the vertical nature of the tower, but also there's also the tower very classically designed with the various kind of levels that it has and water tables and base column capital kind of a thing. So we were kind of playing off of that as well with some of the horizontal lines that we would put in the elevation behind it, but again, always wanting to be kind of a sensitive backdrop to that. So we sort of have this, and I'll show you, but we're actually using 3 different colored brick in kind of a pattern, a geometric pattern that's the lighter color. And then the darker brick becomes those other elements that kind of play off of that, and still kind of still operating as the detailing, I think, on the darker brick is sort of creating reveals. So even though it's one color, would be like setting in courses to get some horizontal reveals in there. As you move across, you get the very middle of the lower. I'm speaking of the west elevation, which is the one that faces the commons. In the very middle of that is where the media center and the art room is, the darker band with the horizontal windows. And that little sketch in the upper right kind of shows a view from the art room. So it's when you look out of the art room, you can see the tower, you can see the rec center, you can see the common space. So that was kind of an important, again, trying to make connection with some of these elements that are on the site that are important to the site. And then as we move to the right, then we have the student dining. Music is in that sort of next light colored band with the windows at the corner there, which again those are the student dining, which overlook the playground, but also overlook the memorial garden. And then going into the administrative area, which is kind of the lowest volume. So this sort of has a step up as we move to the north. And then if we go to the south elevation, which is the main entry, there's a rendering of that, and I can talk a little bit more of that. One of the largest, massing wise, one of the largest elements obviously is the gym. It is the tallest piece. So what we've done here is kind of broken down that scale on that south elevation where there's masonry on that first section of the lower section, and then it turns into a metal panel, a horizontal metal panel that's applied to the upper areas of the gym, and that wraps all the way around. So you see it on that elevation, the west elevation, you see it there as well, but it sits back from that. But that material kind of wraps itself around the gym and then around a mechanical yard you'll see on the other elevations. So next slide. Again, now the east elevation, let's go down to the lower elevation, is the one that's against West 98th. So you can see where that gym wall gets split between the masonry and the metal. The main kind of mechanical and deliveries is on 98th. So it's behind a masonry wall. That's the same kind of detailing that would be on that dark area. And it wraps around. So all of the, it's all the stuff that, transformers and generators and chillers and all those things that have to be outside are behind that wall. The main delivery area is that door on the right, on the left-hand side, that double door on the left, and that aligns with, on the site, with the driveway that goes back to the apartments. So the apartments are all, everything that happens to the north of that. The houses really start from that point going south on 98th. Then the academic wing, again, to the north, to the right there, stretches out with that same kind of detailing that happens on the other side. And then there's a stair tower at the very end. Then on the north elevation, now this one is the one that's up really close to Detroit and close to the tower. So what to pay attention to is just the very middle where the vertical window is, where the stair tower is, and then either side of that where the light colored brick is. Everything that's shown on either side of that is actually set way in the back. So really it's just that middle part that is the part that stretches itself out all the way to Detroit or close to Detroit. And you can kind of see the dimension then from that edge of that light mass on the right-hand side over to the tower. And again, it's about 46 feet, something like that. So another opportunity, I think, for signage. I think I didn't talk about the signage on the south side, but there's also a school signage on the north side here. And CMSD typically does, standoff letters. That's what we've typically done. We don't do monument signs. Everything is on the building, so that's becomes a kind of a sign for the building. So go to the next slide. I think this is okay. So this kind of shows you a blow up of what at least intended right now. The three colors of brick, the pattern, the light pattern, which actually involves all three colors in kind of this sort of dashed kind of horizontal means, and then sort of introducing the darker brick as lines. And then in the darker color, it shows up as two different colors. It's really not, but it's really color. Then there's sort of textural things that are done with the brick coursing that's set in. Just kind of gives you an idea of that. Next slide then. Okay, so there's the south side rendering. It shows that entry piece. Now this is one of the things of the comments from the design review is that they thought this was too modern. They were really trying to kind of play back to the tower in some ways and get almost make it a little more, I'll say traditional, but just not so mid-century modern kind of a thing, what's shown here. And when we're looking at how we can modify this to kind of pick that up, but you see that the darker material, you see it changing to the pattern material in the light, and then the metal panel on the upper side of the gym there. Go to the next slide. This one kind of shows looking, the Timur Race Garden is there on the left, and the rec center in the left side in the background. You can see the playground that comes out next to the school, and the window that's in the student dining. So that large window is in the student dining. And then as the building stretches to the north, and then the clock tower that sits in the background there. Next slide. Okay, so this is, and I have to admit that I don't think this is an accurate depiction of what actually, I think there's too much foreground here. But this is the north end of the building and the tower that's shown there, and then the rec center that's shown on the right in the background there. But I think everything is a lot tighter up here that doesn't show in this rendering, and we're working on changing that. But there's a sidewalk that comes up here in the foreground. The playground is not shown in here, so that's another piece. But I think there's an elevation change. When you're on Detroit, it drops down several feet, and then it kind of flattens out in that lower area. But I think this depiction is not quite, isn't what that is, your real experience there when you're standing on the sidewalk on Detroit. And we will modify this to make it, to reflect that a little more accurately. But just the idea that this is kind of the end of the building, it's close to Detroit, and it's an opportunity for some signage on this end. So that is the last slide of the presentation. So obviously, any questions or comments or reactions is appreciated.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with feedback from the local design review committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This went to the Gordon Square Design Review Committee on August 10th. It was reviewed conceptually, so they didn't take any action. I will go through all the comments. There were a lot of comments, mostly because this is a very complex site. I think there was a feeling that the trees in the clock tower are critical to the campus feel of the site. Where the building comes past the clock tower, the engagement is not powerful. They want to incorporate the building better into the existing park, stitch the plan into the existing conditions, and have a tree plan that reflects that. There was concern with how the building interacts with the clock tower. They asked for the preservation of more large trees at the north end. They asked that the applicant note where existing trees are and overlay them on the site plan. There was a suggestion to relate the design to the immediate context rather than the mid-century rec center. At the north end, where the building faces Detroit, study if historic elements could be incorporated. They asked them to consider how students could interact on the site with the existing Cadell Arts Center and the gym. Regarding the requirement for parking, they asked if there could be an allowance to underpark the school and use the rec center parking to pull the building further south. They feel that the clock tower is a neighborhood icon. There should be a condition survey of the tower and seismic sensors to protect it during construction. Regarding the north elevation of the building, they asked if they could study the reuse of elements, incorporate decorative brickwork where the building faces Detroit and the park to make it look more iconic. They were concerned about the northern green space, how it was managed, and how it interacts with pedestrians. At the north end, look at the landscape and add soft elements of furniture to delineate the comfort zone between public space and school space. Is there an opportunity at the northeast part of the building to open up the space there? The main pathway, look at the way pedestrians cross Detroit Avenue and mitigate the dangerous crossing conditions. It was pointed out that Westtown CDC had commissioned a plan to study the rights of way, traffic calming, and enhancing pedestrian zones to produce a safer crossing there. And they asked that although that's out of the jurisdiction of the applicants, that all of those things should be considered in the plan. There was concern about the west elevation and its horizontality. Is there a way to incorporate the lines of the clock tower in the main entrance portico? And there was a concern that the elevations on West 98th Street, the back of the house uses there, turn their back on the neighborhood. Is there a way to make it feel and be better incorporated into the neighborhood, including adding windows there? So those were all the comments from the Design Review Committee. They did feel, however, overall that it was a very strong presentation.
Thank you for that summary. That was helpful. We will open up the floor to the committee for questions and comments. Mr. Brunges, before we start.
Thank you, Mr. Benesi.
You're breaking up on my side, Carl. You said Mr. Bonesi had to exit, and did he give you comments?
Yeah, that's something else more. He appreciated the modern forms of the
Carl, your voice is very garbled. We can't hear you.
No, we can't hear you at all now.
Well, that's not garbled.
Are you going to put them in the chat so that we can read them?
That's a good idea, Chair.
Okay, so while Carl is typing that in, other questions and comments from the commission? Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just can't recall, have we already reviewed and approved the demolition of the existing school?
We have not. And we're not acting on that today. We will still need to do a site visit at the appropriate time. At this point, we're just looking at the concept plan for the new building and the redevelopment of the site.
All right, so my question involved a survey of the existing school to see if the comments from the design review committee would be appropriate in terms of salvage of elements, primarily I would assume on the exterior, from the exterior of the existing school that might be incorporated on that north elevation to make it more iconic, was the comment, I think, from design review. So is it practical that request could be accommodated, or do we just not know at this point?
Can I respond?
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
Absolutely.
Henderson.
Okay, I mean, I think it's a vintage 70s building, not unlike Waterston Lake. There's not a lot of detail. It's a fairly simple brick building. So there isn't anything in my head that could be salvaged externally, on the exterior and incorporated into the new project.
Okay, so I understand that. So I guess I'm a little confused in terms of the basis of the comments from design review about the incorporation of historic elements into the new design. I don't know if it's practical.
Yeah, I think there was a feeling from one of the members that they prefer to see more traditional elements incorporated into the design rather than the modern take from the rec center. And I think that's, and maybe that's incorporating elements from the clock tower, but I also realize we need to be careful about how we stick ornamentation on an overall, modern contemporary design. So I think we have to take all of those comments with a grain of salt.
I would totally agree with that. My initial impression is that it's a very handsome design. I understand the comments regarding the portico entry, and it sounds like PDA is going to study that.
Yes.
And try to look at an alternate design for that. But I think it's a very handsome building, well thought out, and will fit appropriately within the context of the neighborhood. So I would agree that we should, to some degree, discount that comment regarding the, particularly the north elevation and how it relates to the clock tower.
All right, thank you, Mr. Strickland. I guess I will go next. I don't see anybody else. I echo some of the committee's feedback, which specifically about the West 98th Street elevation. I think you've been very thoughtful about the south elevation and the west elevation, how it relates to the rec center. But to me, the east elevation feels a little austere, and it feels like it's not engaging the community as much as it should. The south side specifically of that west elevation, only having a door and no windows, to me, doesn't allow that connectivity with its neighbors. So I'd encourage you to study that. I'm sorry, I don't remember the function behind it. I know your admins were on the west side of your entry point. I don't remember what's on the east side. If there's an opportunity to get some more windows in there, or at least some masonry articulation, so that it's not just such a monolithic, wall.
Right. That the south side of that is the gym. So that's the gym wall that's there. So again, and we recognize that this probably needs some more effort. But that was part of the idea of splitting that gym into a lower masonry and upper metal panel. But again, I think we recognize that we need to think about that a little more and get it to respond to the neighbors across the street if possible.
I agree. I think that's, will allow it to be integrated into the neighborhood more. I think maybe the intentions of the committee about relating to the neighborhood more would be like the masonry color, the buff color of the rec center isn't as predominant in the neighborhood. It's a much more like a richer, deeper, light brick than it is that sort of more modern buff. That I would just encourage you to look around the neighborhood if that's truly the right color, because there's very few buildings that have that same materiality in this area, and you're engaging with the neighborhood. This is going to be your neighborhood school. I am not a big fan of where you've located the pre-K, or at least have articulated you would like to locate the pre-K playground, especially with a 6-foot fence. Because it is your Detroit Avenue view, the way the bridge comes across, I was just, zooming around in Google Earth, and also I'm familiar with this area. It's putting that larger, higher fence right as your first visual of this area. I think also for policing, for lack of a better word, of the playground and making sure that it is taken care of. My personal preference would be that it would be on the east side of the building or somewhere that's more visible by the neighborhood itself. That is a very transient area of Detroit because of where the bridge is, where the RTA station is, how big this road is there. You don't really have many eyes on that northern side like you would on the eastern side of the building. So that would just be my personal opinion and recommendation. I think it would be taken care of better if it had more connection to the neighborhood to its east. And then maybe the 6-foot fence isn't as big of a deal or may not be needed if you don't have a gate connection, to the neighborhood. But at least you'd have eyes on that area. It would also respect the clock tower more and allow that clear view to the clock tower. Where if the playground where you've shown it, I think would really sort of trap the clock tower in the future.
Okay.
I think those were my questions. And just for curiosity, is this what is the current student population, and is this expanding in students and consolidating other schools? Is that why it's so much larger than the existing footprint?
It's the existing building is a 3-story building currently. So, and I think the occupancy, and Holly, you can correct me, is like, it's under 400, I believe. And we're just over that. So I think it's, it's assuming some expansion and stuff, but I don't, it's really these students that are coming here. I don't believe there's any other students from other schools that would be here. But I think that's principally why it's probably a smaller footprint, because it's a 3-story building.
I see. Okay. Well, that is helpful. I think that those were my primary comments this time. Mr. Pettit, do you have additional questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I just have one comment as staff, since I won't get to do this much anymore. So I'm going to use my privilege. I think I agree with Mr. Strickland that this is a handsome, sensitive, elegant, well-designed building. But I also think that, like Joseph Gallagher, it could use a splash of color, and maybe it could use an accent color. I'm not saying go crazy, but it is a pre-K to 8 school. And I remember Bob Madison, when he sat on the commission, once asked about a proposed new school, where is the joy? And I think the design could use a little more joy. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. That's helpful and a very great recommendation. Mr. Strickland, do you have additional feedback? I see your hand still up.
No, Madam Chair, again, I can't tell the status of my raised hand.
No problem. Does anyone else in the commission have any further questions or comments? All right, since this is a conceptual plan, we'll not be voting, but does the applicant feel like you've received enough feedback to continue the development of the project?
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate all your comments.
All right, thank you. We look forward to seeing you back in the future with a further development project.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our conceptual plan reviews. We'll move on to National Register of Historic Places nomination. Turn over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it will be me today again. As you know, in our role as a certified local government, we are sometimes asked to comment on proposed National Register nominations to the State Preservation Advisory Board. This will go to the board on September 23rd. You know, this is one of those buildings that has it all, in my opinion. It's architecturally significant. It's got multiple layers of historical significance. And we're joined today by Margaret Land, who's the author of this nomination. The building was built in 1922 for the Anshe Emeth Beth Tefillo Synagogue and the Cleveland Jewish Center. It was purchased by Corey United Methodist Church in 1946. It's significant for its architecture. I'm going to read directly from the nomination. It's the masterpiece of architect Alfred F. Janowitz. It's the largest synagogue constructed in the Glenville neighborhood and the only one with recreational facilities, including a pool. The neoclassical design incorporates Judaica symbols and names and decorative terracotta elements throughout the facade, setting it apart from other synagogues in the Glenville neighborhood. It is, you know, together with the notable architectural significance of the church, the role that Corey United Methodist Church played in Cleveland's history, led the building to be designated as a Cleveland landmark in 2012. Today, Corey United Methodist Church remains an iconic symbol of Cleveland's civil rights movement, stretching from the inception of modern civil rights from 1954 to 1964, and again from 1965 to 1976. The property also retains its association with the Anshe Emeth Beth Tefillo congregation and is significant to the ethnic and Jewish heritage of the community that constructed the building. Many of the elements reflect the Jewish heritage of the community, and its impact on the development of the Glenville neighborhood is evidenced today in its continued architectural presence on East 105th Street. And thanks to the continued stewardship of Corey United Methodist Church, the building continues to be as impressive today as when it first opened in 1922. And I will turn this over to Margaret Land to update us on where their work is with the building and to fill in any of the gaps that I left in the history and significance.
Thanks, Don. I don't think you left any gaps there. It is an honor to be working on this nomination. It's a wish that the church has had for actually quite some time. Several of its pastors have been interested in seeing this building listed. And it is part of a larger project that we're working on through a civil rights grant of the National Park Service. We are, in addition to seeing this nomination being completed, we're working on restoration of exterior terracotta and masonry. The bids for that project have currently gone out. We hope to review those bids over the rest of the month of September and enter into a contract this fall with construction work hopefully starting in the spring. We're going to allow the winter months time for the terracotta mold to be made. That's our timeline right now. Hopefully we can keep to that. Obviously, we'll be back before this body, for review of the proposed construction work when we get there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Any additional elements you want to present on the project before we move into questions and comments from the commission? Nope.
No.
All right. This is a gorgeous facility. I'm really impressed with the condition of it. I was never aware of all the details contained within the building. The exterior is impressive, but the interior is just beautiful to see how well it's been preserved. I'm personally in support of this nomination. Other feedback from the commission? Ms. Anderson?
I'll be real quick. I had a chance to drive by last week before this came into my inbox, and I was just in awe of the building. This is really wonderful to see, and it's so encouraging that the interior is still intact the way it is. So I'm very excited about this nomination.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would echo those comments that obviously the building from the exterior is extremely impressive, but when I've never been inside, this church, but it's just fantastic. I can't imagine just the architectural expression and the detailing on the interior is just wonderful. And I really appreciate the fact that it's been so well maintained. It'd be hard to think that you could find craftsmen today in sufficient numbers to recreate any space like this. It's just spectacular. So I strongly support the nomination.
I agree. With that, would you like to put forward a motion?
When I enthusiastically put forth a motion to advance the nomination, this church for registry in the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you for the motion. Do we have a second?
I enthusiastically second that motion.
Excellent. We have a very enthusiastic motion review today. To the motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce the results.
And hopefully I'll get right who's still here. Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bonezzi, Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland is still here.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you.
Excellent. We look forward to this moving forward. It's well deserved.
Thank you
Surprised
very
it's not
much.
registered already.
I hope everyone gets an opportunity to see it in person as public programming and things continue in that space.
Excellent. Let's keep our eyes open because that's, I was unaware. It's a great facility. So that concludes our nominations for today. We'll move on to administrative reports. Carl or Don?
Madam Chair, I think this is the time to turn it over to the chair's report for a change.
Well, so I guess I have a very brief chair's report. What I actually do is that, as we know, Don will be leaving us after this meeting. We're very sad, but very happy for him for his future endeavors. And we'd like to have a celebration for Don regarding September 23rd. So I hope everyone can join us then. But in the meantime, just want to say, Don, thank you for all of your work that you've done for the Landmarks Commission, and the guidance you've given everyone on this commission along with the community. And Ms. Petrus said the same thing. That she's going to very much miss you.
Thank you, Julie. I will miss everyone. There's a lot of people to thank from my end too, and I just want to thank the current commission for the last few years. It's been a pleasure for me, and I'll miss all of you too. And I'm terrible at goodbyes, so I apologize.
We're not going to say goodbye. We'll say see you soon. And hopefully that's in September 23rd that we can all actually be together, because for many on the commission, many of us haven't seen or actually met each other in person, really. So we look forward to just hopefully seeing everybody then.
I will be there, and I look forward to it too.
We'll be emailing some info to everyone on that here in the near future. I think Carl had switched back to some more of the administrative reports. I don't want to overlook what Carl put in the chat, is that the Heritage Ohio Annual Preservation Conference will be October 3rd through 5th in Toledo. If anybody else would like to open their mic and say anything to Don while we still have him, please do that. You're in right now.
Don, it's been a pleasure working with you and under your leadership for the last 8 years. You're going to be, I would say, impossible to replace, but we're going to try to continue as best we can with the good work of this commission, and certainly appreciate all you've done. Gonna miss you. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. I can be replaced. I'll assure you of that.
We have good backup with Carl, so that's but part
We'll have more staff this year, so I think that will be a big improvement and a big change.
Carl said we're bringing Don back as an intern in a few months. you can't get rid of us,
He can be a double dipper.
There you go. Work for the Army Corps. So, well, Don, I know you don't love the spotlight, but really do appreciate everything, and wish you the best of luck. And I look forward to seeing everybody in a few weeks to really celebrate you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Don. It's been wonderful working with you. It's hard to imagine you being replaced because you've been tremendous, and I really appreciate having the honor of participating in these meetings with you.
Thanks. The feeling's mutual, just not so well expressed. Thanks.
There you go, Don. You don't have to leave.
Yes.
Sarah.
Tara still thinks she can keep me from leaving the building. My last day may be challenging.
Gonna steal your car keys, so you have to stay. So, all right, everyone. Well, we appreciate everybody hanging on for the entire meeting. We are going to adjourn today's meeting and look forward to seeing everybody either at the next Landmarks Commission meeting or the celebration for Don on the 23rd. So, with that, have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Don.